Hello, let me know where you're from in the world and what time it is after liking this video. Things have deteriorated here to a degree that I didn't foresee. I didn't know how much writing about the things that are happening out here would affect every single part of my life. And maybe that was stupid of me. Maybe I should have considered it more seriously, but honestly I just thought I was writing about things that a few people would want to hear. I didn't think it would get this much attention. People ask me about the stairs now. It doesn't happen every day, but when it does happen, I never really know what to say. My bosses know someone is talking about them, and I'm sure that if they know, the higher-ups know. And I can tell you that they aren't happy about it. I've been formally told that I am not to speak a word about them to anyone anymore, which is part of the reason this has to be my final update. I can't risk my job for this. As much as it's been wonderful to get a lot of these things off my mind, I still do love my work, and I need to be out here. If anything, my being aware of what's really going on is enough reason to stick it out. I may not be able to tell people that they're out there, but if I see them, I can direct traffic away to somewhere safer. Because of the amount of attention the stories have gotten, I've heard a lot of stories being swapped back and forth. I've heard so many I can't even remember most of them. The ones I do remember are the ones that I wish I could forget. One story that's made the rounds here was about a young woman who disappeared upstate. Initially, everyone assumed she was a runaway. She didn't come from a great home life, and so it really wasn't any kind of surprise that she'd choose to cut and run. But people started coming forward saying that they'd seen her around the park shortly before she vanished, so some of the rangers in the area were sent out to make sure she hadn't hung herself or something on any of the back trails. It took them a while, but they did find her. Well, not all of her. Just half of her tongue and a quarter of the lower jaw. Very clean cuts from what I heard. They've never found the rest of her. So many stories about children, so many of them going missing and turning up in caves, wedged in between impossibly tight spaces. So many of them found on mountain peaks or at the bottoms of sheer gullies. Missing shoes, missing socks, or found with both in perfect condition despite them being miles and miles away from where they vanished. So many stories of black-eyed people wandering around the woods and calling out in the night, mimicking the sound of running water or a bobcat screaming. One man in particular goes to every news station he thinks will listen to him and tells the same story. He was deer hunting, had camped out in a very remote area, and woke up because something was scraping against his tent. He thought it was a raccoon or a fox until the thing pressed its face against the door of the tent, at which point he could very clearly make out a human nose and mouth. He kicked at it, but it leapt back and was gone by the time he opened the tent flap, gun at his side. He fired 2 warning shots, and when the sound had faded, he heard a snap behind him. A man was standing at the edge of the campsite. This man was not wearing any clothing, but he also didn't possess any kind of human flesh. As this hunter described it, the man was made of some kind of amalgamation of raw meat and hair, as if someone had scooped up roadkill and molded it into the vague shape of a man. The face was lumpy and only a rough approximation of a human face. The thing opened its lopsided mouth, and from it came the sound of the gun the hunter had fired. It did this twice before mimicking the sound of the tent zipper and fleeing into the night. A young couple, out for a hike in the rocky areas of my park, reported to me yesterday that they had seen something strange out on a peak I'm very familiar with. They were taking turns looking through a pair of binoculars when the man noticed a hiker climbing up a very steep part of the cliff face. He watched the man scale the slope, and it didn't occur to him until the incident was over that this person had no climbing gear. When the climber reached the top of the peak, which was about 5 miles away, they turned and faced the young man. He said whoever, or whatever this person was looking right at them. The climber waved in an exaggerated manner before snapping in half at the waist, sideways, and leaping off the peak. The young man didn't see where the climber landed. I sent them on their way with assurances that I'd check it out. I lied. I won't be turning in a report because there are 10 others exactly like it. The climber is well known in that area. I don't question it anymore. There are so many things I won't ever be able to understand about my job, and it would take me years to relate all of the things I've heard in the last few months. When I feel like my job isn't in jeopardy, I will come back. It may be in a different format, but I will come back. Thank you all for sticking by my side and enjoying the things I've talked about. If you go out into the woods, I encourage you to be safe. Bring water, food, survival equipment. Let people know where you're going and when you'll be back. Don't go on uncharted paths unless you know exactly what you're doing. And above all, don't touch them. Don't look at them. Don't go up them. Maria on the moon. Did you know that early astronomers thought there were oceans on the moon? I asked, looking up from my book. My mom shifted in her bed, a tangle of IV tubes shifting with her. Of course. The moon seems like the perfect place to find an ocean. What a shame we never found water then, I said, because those false seas, astronomers called them Maria. Mom smiled. How sweet of them to name the moon oceans after me. Well, they didn't find any oceans, I reminded her. Maybe they just didn't look hard enough, she replied, a little laugh slipping from her lips. For all of the pain she was in, all of the fear she must feel, my mother always had the kind of laugh that could light a candle. We were in her hospital room, the same one we'd been in and out of for the last year and a half. Sometimes we had a roommate, sometimes we were alone. Always she held steady enough for both of us, the rock I tied my hope to, the wall against the grief I knew was coming. Cancer is such a mundane word for something so hungry and cruel. I've noticed medicine does that a lot, covers horror with tedious language like a bedsheet over a body. Malignant, inoperable, metastasized, terminal. But when she laughed, we weren't in the hospital anymore, we were home. When she laughed, she wasn't sick, she was young again, and I was a kid, and the world was a bright place begging to be explored. What a miracle my mother was. Cancer had taken so much from her, aged and hurt her, but it could never steal her laugh. That was hers to keep. How are we feeling today? The doctor asked. He came in less and less often. We could all sense this was the final stay in this room. Just brilliant, Doc, my mom said, struggling to sit a little higher. We can still go dancing later if you'd like, though we'll have to ask for my son's blessing. Ever since his dad died, Brian's been very protective of me. I put on a stern face. I'll need to know your intentions are pure, Doctor. Bradshaw. As the driven snow, he played along. But I might need a rain check on the dance, Ms. Willen. I'm not as young as I used to be. He emphasized his age, running his fingers through gray-white hair. My mom tapped her bare scalp. Right there with you, Tiger, she said. Dr. Bradshaw smiled, but I could tell he was burdened. I saw him glance at the small idol I'd placed on my mother's nightstand. The talisman was a miniature oak tree carved from gray soapstone. There were 4 faces etched into the tree, a sentry against ill health and bitter spirits. I could tell the stone tree made the doctor uncomfortable. In all honesty, I had a tough time looking at the idol for more than a few seconds. The faces were each whittled in vivid expression. The face closest to my mother's bed was smiling kindly, and the face pointed towards the door was snarling, meant to ward away harm. The final 2 faces were both weeping. All 4 shapes were too human, too raw. There was a weirdness to the stone tree that put people on edge, but I'd grown used to every shade of weird you can imagine. My mother's side of the family was full of stories of unexplained luck and mysterious tragedy, whispered secrets and unexplained deaths. By all accounts, my maternal grandmother was either an honest-to-goodness witch or full-bore, high-caliber crazy, or both. Probably both. The stone tree was from a box of my grandmother's things I'd found in the attic earlier that month. Maybe it was just a coincidence, but my mom did seem to get a bit better when I'd brought in the talisman, at least for a little while. I was daydreaming about family history and the odd box while Dr. Bradshaw checked his charts and Mom's vitals. "Can I talk to you for a moment?" he asked, ripping me back to reality. Dr. Bradshaw tried to keep a light tone, but I could tell he didn't have good news. The hospital hallway smelled like ammonia and birthday cake. Someone must have had a party, maybe a patient, maybe a nurse. Strange how you remember the insignificant details while your world is crashing down around you. "I'm so sorry," Dr. Bradshaw told me. "The results came in this morning. It's spreading aggressively, We we held it back as long as we could, Brian. Your mom is a fighter, but right now we just need to try to keep her as comfortable as we can. Brian? The wall was cracking, grief waiting on the other side, heavy and cold as an empty house. I'd known for months that this was the most likely outcome, but it still hurt to hear. Hurt worse than I could stomach. There's nothing left to try? I asked, fighting down the urge to throw up. Anything? Experimental? Untested? Anything? Dr. Bradshaw shook his head. I'm sorry. Sometimes we just run out of options. She fought a good fight. How long does she have left? I asked, looking back into her room. She'd fallen asleep. Not long. Maybe days. Have you considered hospice? The smell of ammonia and birthday cake. The steady beep of Mom's heart monitor. I tried to focus on the world around me. My hope wasn't dead yet. If medicine couldn't help my mom, maybe something older could. I thought of the box of my grandmother's things waiting in the attic. There was a lot in there I hadn't gone through yet. Books and candles and secrets and lost things. Maybe there was a cure, or at least a way to keep the fight going. No, I said. If all that's left is to make her comfortable, I want to take her home. The doctor smiled. I understand. We can give you some medication, ways to help her with the pain. He put his hand on my shoulder. Your mom's been in a lot of pain, but she'll have peace soon. You've done all you can. I know, I lied. Thank you. Mom lived in a small ranch house 10 miles outside of town. There wasn't much in the way of neighbors besides some woods and a creek slithering through her yard. It was a windy, warm March afternoon when I took my dying mother home. That night I began my work. I was going to turn the house into a bunker, a maze death could never solve. I would keep my mother safe. I would find a way to keep her alive. The little red book was full of ideas. Running water was an obvious place to start. The creek behind the house was barely a trickle, but it should provide some coverage to the south side of the property. Salt was next, lining the doorways and window frames, then in an unbroken circle around the entire house. This step was to be repeated daily, the red book stressed, or even multiple times per day. Even a moderate breeze played holy havoc with any salt poured outside, so it was always best to trace and retrace every few hours. Water and salt were common defenses against man's oldest enemy and well known. The book offered other, less conventional advice. It took me nearly a week to finish carving the symbols and signs into the walls, the floors, even the trees on the property. Sometime around noon on the third day, on my back in the crawl space etching strange marks onto the underside of the floor, it struck me how ridiculous I was acting. There was no proof that any of the information in the little red book was anything other than the delusional ramblings of a bizarre woman I'd only met once or twice as a child. For all I knew, the runes meant to ward off death were actually a grocery list written in Cantonese. But I was desperate, and every time I saw my mother, she looked frailer, more fragile. So I continued carving and praying and building layers upon layers of protections to keep death far away. Making my marks took me all over the property. It was a big yard, nearly 3 acres that blended gradually into the surrounding forest. I wasn't able to pinpoint the exact boundary where cultivated met nature, the edges simply bled together, but I did my best to create a clean border with lines between the symbols. I'd always loved the wildness here, the way you could wander a few hundred yards away from home and feel like you'd traveled hundreds of years into the past to somewhere primal. This was the perfect playground for a kid, whether I was out exploring trails or trapping minnows, or spending the summer building yet another treehouse, convinced this would be the final one. It never was. I was never satisfied. The house itself, though small, was more than enough room for my mother and me. Dad died when I was 7. I don't remember much about him, just how big he seemed, with a bonfire grin and arms that I thought could hold the whole world. My mom often said I took after my father. I could see it in the old pictures of him. We had the same eyes, green as moss in the summer, and the same fiery shock of red hair, enemy to every comb on the planet. The sicker Mom got, the more often she called me by my father's name. I worried when she drifted away like that, but a part of me was proud she'd mistake me for him. After all of the symbols were carved, there were a few steps left in the book to deter death from visiting. There were dozens of charms and talismans in the bottom of the old box in the attic. I sat up there, combing through everything my grandmother left behind, referencing the red book, pushing the tiny charms into tidy piles. None of the idols were larger than my thumb. Some were iron and others were wood. Some were heavy, others light. All of them were uncomfortable to look at or touch. The attic was drafty, but not nearly enough to explain the cold that burrowed into me as I sorted the charms. I'm not particularly tall, but the attic felt like it was designed for dolls, beams so low I couldn't even walk bent over. I moved around on my knees, rough floorboards threatening splinters even through my jeans. I could have taken the box downstairs where I'd have more room, but the idea filled me with a deep unease. It seemed better to leave the box up in the attic, only taking down objects as I needed them. Up here, at least, my grandmother's items, her legacy was quarantined. The red book was very specific about the distribution of the totems around the house and property. I walked carefully through my mom's backyard, boots plopping in and out of mud, compass in hand. It had rained nearly every day since I'd taken my mom home from the hospital. I knew it was almost certainly a coincidence, but couldn't help wonder if the soft curtains of rain falling to the ground were for her. I placed charms in a compass rose with the house in the middle. The most disturbing objects were given places of honor at each cardinal direction. Water, salt, wards, charms, all placed carefully, intentionally. My grandmother's book promised that these would offer some degree of protection against the inevitability of death. The symbols would confuse it, the talismans distract it, and the water and salt make barriers to slow it down. But death might still find a crack to slip through, so the red book recommended one final trick. There was a small candle in the bottom of the box, dirty white as stained paper. When I took the candle from its case, the smell made me gag. Have you ever walked past a portable toilet in the dog days of summer? When it's so hot the blue plastic has started to warp and bubble? Imagine that smell distilled into a finger's worth of wax. I brought the candle downstairs, placed it on the dining room table, and set it alight. The wick caught immediately, the flame burning an unusual red-brown. No heat came off of the candle, and it actually seemed cooler the closer I moved my hand to the fire. Once the wax began to melt, the smell was 10 times worse than it was back in the attic. I choked down a greasy sickness crawling up my throat and quickly left the room, shutting the French doors as I went. That helped trap the odor, but I couldn't shake the sense of nausea. I went to check on my mother. "Do you remember the day you ran away?" my mom asked, sitting in her bed, lunch untouched on the nightstand beside her. I didn't think she had any weight left to lose before she was nothing but bone and memory. Her skin was rice paper over a frame that seemed smaller every day. Her eyes, though, no matter how fragile the rest of her became, remained two little lanterns against the dark, blue and bright and alive. "I didn't make it very far," I answered, "and I wasn't really running away, only stretching my legs." Mom smiled. "You told me you were leaving for the circus. You wanted to be either a lion tamer or a strong man or maybe a fire eater." I think I wanted to be all of that combined. Young me was big on multitasking. My mother turned, so she was looking out the window into the yard. "I was so scared when I found your note, the one saying you were leaving. My hands were shaking like you wouldn't believe when I called the sheriff and then Mr. Jonas down the way. It felt like we were searching for you for half the night, even though it couldn't have been more than an hour before we found you there, lost in the woods, wandering around and shivering. You hadn't even brought a jacket." I sat next to my mom on the bed. "Yeah, I didn't exactly plan ahead for my circus escape. I remember getting over the idea real quick, but I couldn't find my way back. I'm glad you found me." "I'm glad too," my mother said, and I noticed her wipe away a tear. "I'm so glad. That hour you were gone, Brian, that was the most afraid I've ever been. Afraid we wouldn't find you. Afraid you might be hurt or worse. I couldn't hardly breathe through the fear. Then suddenly, you were there and the relief nearly knocked me over. I think we stayed up together the rest of the night watching the stars." I wanted to make sure you could find the North Star in case you ever got lost again. She turned back to me, reached out her thin hand and placed it over mine. There were still tears in her eyes, but she smiled her lighthouse smile, and for a moment I saw her just as she used to be, just as she was the night I ran away and my mom found me. I squeezed her hand. I was scared too. I was afraid I'd be stuck out there. What made you think of it? Well, I've been thinking a lot about dying lately and... Don't, I interrupted. Don't talk like that. You're not going anywhere, not for a long time. It's okay, she said, squeezing my hand back. It's okay. I've known real fear, and what I'm feeling now. It's not like that. I'm scared, I guess, but I'm at peace with it. I had such a beautiful life. I'm so glad I got to meet you, to be your mom. I'm glad too, I whispered, voice breaking on the last word. But I won't let you go without a fight, I added silently in my mind. Something was trying to get to my mom. The strangeness began the day after I lit the candle. At first it was small blips, tiny wrongs that I chalked up to my imagination. Doors I knew I'd closed at night were open in the morning. Food began to rot and spoil within days of me bringing it into the house. Eventually, food would go bad almost immediately. Every few hours, the television in the living room would either turn off if it was running or on if it was off. Clocks would stop overnight, always at 3:03 a.m. Shadows began sticking to the corners of rooms independent of any light sources. The shadows were stubborn, and they would linger for as long as I would stare, then disappear when I blinked. I began hearing bumps and knocks at all hours, and sometimes, when I'd enter an empty room, I had a sharp, fleeting certainty that it was only just occupied. I avoided the dining room except to check in twice a day to see if the candle was still burning. The smell was vicious, and would claw its way into your throat and nostrils the moment it was given a chance. I kept the door to the room shut and kept air fresheners running in the surrounding rooms 24/7. The funny thing was, the candle never went out, never even seemed to shrink. I could see the wax melting, but day in and day out the candle refused to change. Days marched into weeks, and the wrongness only grew deeper. My mom and I both lost sleep to vivid nightmares that we couldn't remember when we woke up. Only the echoes remained, but those were enough to leave my pulse sprinting until morning. I started sleeping in a chair in my mother's room. I did this to comfort her if she woke up confused during the night, but also because, if I'm being honest, I was too scared to sleep alone. I felt like a child running into his parents' room, convinced there was a monster under the bed. Thing is, maybe there was. By the third week, I couldn't keep doors closed. They would slam open the moment I left the room. A terrible scratching began inside of the walls. I told my mom it might be squirrels or mice, but the sound was so insistent, not like rodents milling about, more like a dog wanting in. I stopped leaving the house for supplies. Instead, I had what little food we ate delivered. I kept the curtains drawn. There was tapping on the glass every night. About a month after leaving the hospital, we were living like zombies. The dining room couldn't contain the smell of the candle anymore. The entire house was clogged with the scent. Tiny noises had graduated into full-on laughs and screams and whispers in the rooms around us. Something kicked the bathroom door so hard while I was taking a shower that the hinges warped. I covered every mirror in the house. I'd started to see things in the corners looking back at me, half-hidden faces, shapes that skittered away as soon as I turned around. Mom was drifting further and further away. She had long moments of confusion where she'd forget my name, forget where we were. Sometimes she'd think I was my dad. Other times, she'd just stare at the wall for hours, growing fainter and fainter each day like a Polaroid left in the sun. But she was alive. It was clear that we were under siege by something. My world shrank to only one room, and every trip to the bathroom, or to answer the door for food, felt like going over the trenches. The noises kept getting worse and worse, the shadows closer, the sense of movement around the house sharper. Every now and then I would feel hot breath on the back of my neck or walk through a cold patch hanging in the air. I stopped bothering redrawing the lines of salt around the house. I knew, deep in my bones, that as long as the sickly candle burned, death could not take my mom away. On the 33rd day after leaving the hospital, I woke with a start from a nightmare, only to find my mom's bed empty. She hadn't been able to walk the past week at all, so my first feeling was hope that she might be improving, at least a little. Then I noticed the odor we'd been living with for weeks was gone. "Mom!" I shouted, running in bare feet out of the room. I found her in the dining room, the door wide open. She was standing at the table, frail as a neglected scarecrow, bobbing back and forth. Her hands were hovering over the candle. The flame was out. "Why did you do that?" I whispered. "Mom? Mom? Are you okay?" I padded into the room, the wooden floor freezing cold. My mother didn't react to my presence. She just continued rocking side to side. I realized she was still asleep. "Mom?" I gently shook her shoulder. "Wake up." Her head snapped back and she nearly fell. I caught her on the way down. It felt like she weighed nothing at all. "What's going on?" she asked, looking around the dark room. "Where?" "You're okay," I told her. "You were sleepwalking." "I was having the most unusual dream," Mom mumbled. "There were so many stars and—" She began to shiver uncontrollably. The cold hit me a moment later. I let out a gasp. The house was chilly before, but the dining room was near Arctic. My breath bloomed into a thin cloud in front of my face. I became acutely aware of the complete silence filling the house. Then I heard scratching. It was coming all throughout the house, deep tearing sounds at the walls around the dining room. Footsteps came immediately after, heavy and fast. Somewhere in the house, a window shattered. "Brian," my mother said, holding on to me. "Don't worry," I said. "Everything will be—" My voice deserted me as a massive shadow unfolded in the corner of the room. It was shaped like a man, but tall. So very tall. And it was fast. Before I could yell, the shadow was on us, pouring over my mother. In the space of a heartbeat, she was simply gone. "No," I whispered, clawing at the dissolving shadow where my mom used to be. "No, no, 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 no." The shadow was disappearing like a puddle, sinking into the floor. There was a texture to it, oily and too slick to hold. I thought of my mother the night she found me lost in the woods, the night I'd run away. Her face filled my memory, her lighthouse smile. I remembered the relief I felt when she found me, the overwhelming love. I held on to that feeling, clutching it close. "You can't have her," I whispered. I closed my fist around the last threads of the shadow. There was a terrible sensation of pulling. It was like I'd caught a horse by the tail and it was trying to shake me. But I held on. A sense of ripping and being dragged. It was a riptide with a mind of its own. But I held on. It could not shake me. The temperature was dropping every second and I felt my vision growing dark. The last thought that ran through my head before I blacked out was a promise to myself that even if I died, my grip would hold. I wouldn't let my mother's life slip away. All sounds and light faded, narrowing to a pinprick and then going black. I woke up under a field of stars. I was lying in soft grass, still wearing my pajama bottoms and an old t-shirt. It was cool, wherever I was, but comfortably so. I stood up. There were trees all around me, tall and close, stitched together with shadows. Immediately to my right, there was a road that ran straight as far as I could see, blurring into the horizon. But the stars, they were like nothing I'd ever seen before. Bright ribbons of northern lights rippled above me in green and blue and purple. Stars lit the sky like millions of lanterns floating on a still ocean. The moon shone sharpest of all, a spotlight hanging above the tree line, so close I thought I could stretch up and brush its face. "You are persistent," said a voice from the forest behind me. I whipped around but couldn't see anyone. Then a dark spot began to clarify against the gloom. The silhouette separated itself and moved towards me. I recognized it instantly as the shadow from the dining room. As it moved closer, the thing grew and grew until it touched the sky and filled my vision. A deep dread sank into me, but I stood my ground. "Give me back my mom," I shouted. The silhouette pulled away from the sky, and then it was standing in front of me, the shape and size of a tall man. But instead of a shadow, the thing had wrapped itself in stars. Miniature constellations drifted across its body, floating slowly like a time-lapse of a clear night sky. Burning brightest was the North Star, blue and warm. The space between the stars was absolute black, not a shadow but a complete absence of light. It was the most beautiful, terrifying thing I'd ever seen. "What are you?" I whispered. "You know," it replied. "Give her back," I begged. "Please, give her back." "I can't. It's her time. Past her time. You delayed me. Delayed her." I clenched my fists. "She didn't get enough time. I didn't get enough time. It's not right. It's not fair." "Of course it's not fair," the starry thing said. "But it is right. You each have your time, and at the end of it, there's me, and there is a road, and we walk it together." "Where to?" I asked. "Where are you taking her?" "I don't know. It's not for me to know, only to know how to get there." "Then I won't let you take her." I planted myself in the road. The world was still and solemn around us. The constellations drifted like clouds, and a soft breeze stirred the branches. The starry thing didn't respond for a moment. "Your mother was kind and caring. Wherever she goes, she'll have peace," it promised. "But," the creature raised its hand, "did you ever stop to think that death isn't an enemy? Death simply is. It is the natural partner to life. It knows no prejudice or malice, has no designs or ambitions. Your mother spent so long suffering, felt so much pain. Instead of letting her rest, you took it upon yourself to draw her life beyond its given course. You kept her alive, but at the cost of stretching her thin, prolonging her sickness, diluting her. Did you keep her alive for her benefit or for yours?" I couldn't answer. "Stretching a life is unnatural, dangerous," it told me. "In the weeks you kept me away, you drew the attention of old things, hungry things, forces that would like nothing better than to swallow even the memory of your mother, to tear and bite until there was nothing left but pain and fear and a perfect emptiness." I shuddered, remembering the clawing sounds, the shattered window, and the laughter from empty rooms. "I'm sorry," I whispered. Can they hurt her here? Is she safe?" The stars in the shadow burned brighter for a moment. "Your mother won't walk her road alone. None of you do. I walk with you, always to the end." "Can I see her?" I asked. "Please, let me say goodbye." It considered for several seconds. "You are persistent." And then the starry thing was gone. I was standing alone on an empty road. "Brian." I turned to find my mother behind me on the road. She looked younger, healthier than I'd seen her in years. The frailty was gone, and my mother seemed exactly as I remembered her when she found me in the woods all those years ago. "Isn't this the most beautiful dream?" she asked, staring up at the night sky. "Yeah," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "A beautiful dream. I love you, Mom. I love you so much, so very much." She smiled and touched my cheek. "I love you too. Don't cry, it's okay. I'll wake up any time now. I'll see you then." I nodded, wiping at tears. "Sure, yeah, I'll see you then." "What do you think is at the end of the road?" she asked. "Do you think I'll have time to find out before I wake up?" I looked out at the road, scanning the trees for any hungry shadows. "I don't know. I don't know where it goes, but promise me you'll be careful." My mom smiled wider. "Of course I'll be careful." "And she won't walk alone," said a familiar voice behind us both. I turned, expecting the starry thing. But the man standing on the road was entirely normal. The light from the moon was enough that I could see he had moss-green eyes and a bright shock of red hair. "Such a beautiful dream," my mother said. The man came towards us and took my mother's hand. He and I looked so alike, I could see why my mother confused us when she was sick. "Take care of her," I told the man. Just please take care of her. Make sure she gets where she's going. There are things out there that want her, to hurt her. It's my fault. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." The man squeezed my shoulder. "She'll be safe, watched over. If the devil himself is waiting on the road ahead, he'll move, or he'll be moved." I believed him. Thoughts raced through my head. There were so many things I wanted to say, questions, a million ways to say goodbye. I wanted to stretch out the moment for as long as I could, but I realized I'd already delayed my mother enough. I love you, I told them both. Goodbye. I woke up back in my dining room sitting at the table, the unlit candle in front of me. The house was quiet and still. There was no more scratching, no sound or sense of life at all. I walked through every room. The house was empty. I was alone. I've spent the past couple months working on the house, erasing the marks I'd made, fixing up the property. Some nights I take long walks out into the forest. I'm far enough out in the country that on clear nights it's like looking up at a sea of stars. I think about my parents the most during those walks. I grieve and remember in my own way. And I wonder where their road went, if they're still traveling or if they reached their destination. I hope that their road takes them strange and beautiful places. When I walk at night, I look up for the North Star to keep from getting lost. Maybe they do the same. When it's full, I also look up towards the moon. I wonder if my parents had a chance to visit, to search for hidden oceans. I like to think they did, that the moon has at least one Maria, the one I love most.
The water park I worked at last summer obtained a shark statue that was discovered abandoned in a lake. They should have left it there. The summer Texas air hung heavy and thick, clinging to everything like a wet blanket, even as the evening sun dipped low. My name is Oliver, and for me, it was just another shift at Schlitterbahn Water Park. My new maintenance tech gig was a decent step up from pulling all-nighters at Waffle House, even if it meant wrestling with chlorine levels and clearing out gross drains. But tonight's task was different. Tonight, I had to dive to the bottom of the Maw. This wasn't just any water slide. The Maw was the park's newest, biggest, and without a doubt, its most unique attraction. It was a giant slide, but the real showstopper was at the very end. The park owner, Sterling, a dude with more money than sense and a famously macabre taste, had bought it. It was a shark statue, dredged from the cold, murky depths of some forgotten lake. According to Reddit, the statue was a prop from a low-budget horror flick, sunk by its creators to startle unsuspecting divers after production wrapped. I'd seen the pictures online, the ones that popped up if you dared to search for abandoned lake shark statue. They were unsettling, sure, but more fascinating than frightening to me. Just a big, weird piece of art. A quick warning, if you have even the slightest bit of submechanophobia, don't look them up. This massive, great white, its head frozen in a bizarre, vague smile that looked almost unintentional. A subtle, upward curl at the corners of its mouth that just seemed off. But to me, it looked cool as hell in the pictures. Sterling had spent a fortune retrieving it, then even more, having it mechanized. Now for just a few extra bucks, after a screaming descent through twisting dark tubes, riders were spat into a vast, deep pool where the shark, its mouth agape, in that almost menacing smile, loomed directly beneath the surface, occasionally lunging upward towards the guests with a hydraulic hiss along a 20-foot track that made the whole pool rumble before the machines pulled it back, making it descend out of sight to the deepest area of the pool, waiting for the next round of unsuspecting victims to trigger the sensor. Tonight, after the last shrieking kid had been ushered out and the gates locked tight, the Maw was silent. Not just quiet, but a profound, almost oppressive stillness that felt strangely peaceful. I ran through my checklist, filters, pressure gauges, and then the shark itself. The most critical sensor was acting up, meaning I had to get in the pool and check its housing. I grabbed my dive gear, feeling a pleasant calm Just another Tuesday night. I strapped on my dive mask, adjusted the regulator, the hiss of my own breath, a steady, comforting rhythm in my ears. The pool water, usually a chaotic riot of splashing, was perfectly still, reflecting the distant park lights like scattered diamonds. I pushed off the edge, sinking smoothly into the cool, chlorinated embrace. The world above vanished in a ripple, leaving me suspended in a dim, watery silence. As I descended, the surface light gradually dimmed, the familiar blue-green deepening to an inky black. I flicked on my dive light, the beam cutting a crisp, clear path through the gloom, and then, there it was, the shark itself. I'd seen it 100 times from the surface, as well as the photos online, but being eye level with it underwater was different. It was huge, dwarfing me, but still just a statue. Its cold, unseeing eyes, twin black voids, didn't bother me, but that smile, so odd, that faint, almost evil-like curl at the corners of its mouth. I figured it was just how the mold settled, a trick of the artist's hand. It seemed to expand slightly in the low light, but that was just the water, the lack of real vision, a mild curiosity, and nothing more. At least that's what I told myself. I forced myself to focus, kicking slowly, deliberately, towards the shark's head. The faulty sensor was located near its jawline. The water directly around the shark was surprisingly clear, almost unnaturally so, as if the massive form repelled the usual murk, granting me an unobstructed view. As I drew closer, the details sharpened. The rough pock texture of its fiberglass skin, somehow organic despite its artificiality. The perfectly formed teeth, each one a predatory shard. And that smile, the one that just didn't quite sit right, seemed to deepen. Not wider, not more aggressive, just deeper. A subtle crinkle around its mouth that hadn't been there before. I paused, treading water. Must be the angle. Or maybe a trick of my dive light, bouncing off the contours. I took a steadying breath, the sound loud and calm in my ears. Just a statue, I murmured, the words a garbled bubble. Just fiberglass and hydraulics. I forced my fingers back to the panel, finding the latch. I finally got it open, revealing a tangle of wires. I quickly checked the connections, nudging a loose one back into place. Done. I started to close the panel, already thinking about getting out and grabbing a cold bottle of sweet tea. Just as my fingers brushed the panel to close it, I glanced up. The shark's head seemed to have shifted a fraction, the subtle tilt to the left, a bit more pronounced, and the smile, it had deepened, just a hair more, a hint of something sly, almost knowing, in its fixed grin. A prickle of unease finally touched my calm, an uninvited chill under my wetsuit. I blinked, shaking my head. Currents. Gotta be the currents. I pushed off the statue, kicking backward. I felt a deep but very brief vibration that seemed to emanate from around the statue itself. My heart gave a little thump, a nervous flutter. Okay, that was weird. The hydraulics were offline. The park was deserted. I was the only one here. Must have shifted slightly with the water currents, or maybe I'd bumped it. I needed to get this done. I needed to check the track itself, where the shark slid. That would mean swimming past it, to its flank, towards where the tail would be. I hesitated for a fraction of a second, that strange, unsettling feeling growing, but I pushed it down. It was silly to be spooked by a hunk of fiberglass and paint. With a deep breath, I swam past the shark's massive, immobile head, past its still body, until I was almost at the tail end of the mechanism, my back to the sharks in its entirety. I worked quickly, checking the rollers on the submerged track, my light beam dancing over the metal. The familiar routine, a welcome distraction from the rising unease. As I pulled my gloved hand back to adjust my light, a sudden, sharp click echoed through the water. It was loud, like metallic and unsettling, almost like teeth clinking together. And it was too close. My breath hitched. A sudden, involuntary spasm. The sound was too precise, too deliberate to have been an accident. My mind screamed at me to spin around, to see, but my body was suddenly paralyzed, muscles locked, refusing to obey. The silence that followed the click was even worse. A heavy, expectant quiet that seemed to hum around me. Every nerve ending in my body screamed wrong, wrong, wrong. I steadied my light, my fingers fumbling, and as I started to attempt to calm myself, a sudden, oppressive cold radiated from behind me, making the terror that was in my blood run even deeper with each passing second. It wasn't the water. It was a presence, a chilling weight, a suffocating awareness that filled the space directly behind me, slowly, reluctantly, as my whole body screaming in protest. My head swiveled, and my entire body froze in its tracks. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. I couldn't think. All I could do was stare in horror at the sight before me. The shark. It was no longer facing forward. Its head merely tilted. No, no, no. It hadn't even just tilted further, a gradual nor a deliberate lean into my personal space. Its entire body was turned completely on its axis, now facing me head on. Its nose was now only a mere 5 feet away from the protective glass of my mask. Its mouth, already agape, seemed to widen, a slow, silent stretch of its impossibly broad jaw that swallowed more of the dim light from my beam. The grin was not just vague, deep, or sly anymore. It was a monstrous, impossible rictus of pure, menacing evil. It stretched impossibly wide, pulling back, 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 until its lips seemed to tear, revealing every single one of its impossibly white, jagged teeth, each one a perfect, ancient blade. Its eyes, those dead, black, unseeing eyes, were now ablaze with a malevolent, hungry glee, reflecting my own terrified, distorted face in their depth. It was still immobile, as it always had been, still as night, but its expression showed a sliver of hidden mortality that shook me to my core. It wasn't just watching me. It was savoring my terror. A silent, yet deafening laugh in its fixed, demonic smile. A cruel amusement in its paralyzing gaze. It was alive, and it was playing with me. Oh, fuck. I didn't bother with my tools. I kicked with desperate, frantic, soul-shattering force, propelled by pure, primal terror through the water. The silent grin of the maw, its eyes lit up with sinister delight, burned itself into my mind, its own special brand of terror. I clawed my way upwards, kicking and thrashing, desperate to break the surface, to escape the crushing darkness. My lungs burned, screaming for air, the dim outlines of the surface lights shimmering tantalizingly above. I was halfway there, a choked sob bubbling from my throat. When I couldn't help myself, I took one last, terrified, agonizing look back. The track was there, but the fucking shark was gone. Nothing but the wavering reflection of the park lights and the silent, swirling chlorine. No, 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 no. I thrashed and kicked furiously towards the lights that swore me my safety, my eyes playing tricks on me. Every bubbly wave from my erratic movements that momentarily obstructed the few inches of clear vision I had was a fin and a flash of a gigantic tooth. The surface seemed 1,000,000 miles away. The fear that I would be pulled back down to bottom of the darkness the second before I finally reached the safety the dock weighing me down, but I scrambled out of the pool, tearing off my mask, my breath coming in ragged, painful, heaving sobs that racked my whole body. I stumbled backward, away from the wooded edge, my gaze fixed on the water, watching it slowly settle, the placid surface, a cruel lie. I knew it wasn't empty. That fucking thing was still there, somewhere. And I knew, with a horrifying, absolute certainty that stole my breath, that it had just let me go. For now. That was my last night at Schlitterbahn. I put in my 2 weeks the very next morning. No explanation given. Just a flat, I'm done. Sterling called me multiple times, begged me to reconsider, even offered a bonus. Oliver, please. I'm not sure what happened, but we can fix this. Just tell me what you want. Give me a number, man. I'll match it. But I just hung up. I couldn't set foot in that place again, especially not near that pool. The thought of that black fucking abyss beneath the water of that pool was enough to make me gag. As it would turn out, the park closed down for good. A few months later, the official line was unforeseen operational difficulties. But everyone knew it was just code, for we can't tell you why, but it's bad. A few days later, Sterling just dropped off the face of the earth, and no one has seen or heard from him in a year. They never mentioned the shark in any capacity. It was never spoken of again, almost like they had done their due diligence to erase the fact that it even existed. I don't know what happened to it, if it was ever moved again, or if it just stayed there, along with the rest of the park, abandoned and waiting in the depths of the now disgustingly unkempt water. I hope to God no one ever finds it. Not in that pool, not in any lake, ever again. May it be lost forever. But unfortunately for me, it doesn't matter if it's hidden from the rest of the world. I see it every night. That grin, those eyes, just before it vanished. It's always there, waiting in the darkest corners of my dreams, bubbling beneath the surface of my consciousness. And now, I can't even look at a swimming pool without feeling that cold dread, that lurking predatory presence all around me, watching me. Open water. Forget about it. The world suddenly feels too deep and too full of things that watch you from the dark, things that hunt you, things that smile. Edit. Holy shit. A breaking story on the news tonight immediately caught my attention while I was eating dinner. A group of parents are desperately pleading for anyone who can give them information on the potential whereabouts of their missing children. 3 teens have been missing since last night. They were last seen by a homeless man hopping the fence of a local abandoned water park. Being young and rebellious often means being young and dumb. You usually make dozens of stupid choices before that voice in your head finally screams, just say no. So I don't know if that makes me one of the lucky ones, still here while my 2 best friends aren't. I'm trying to decide, but it's a decision I'm not getting anywhere with. Fuck. Let me start over. My name is Tommy. I'm sure you're wondering why I'm telling you this, why you should care what some random 16-year-old kid has to say on the internet at 2 a.m. You've probably already left, scrolling for something more entertaining. But if you're still here, thank you. And if you dare to hear my story, I only ask that you refer to the link above before you proceed. It will all make so much more sense. I just can't shut my eyes. Every time I do, I see it. That smile. Those dead fucking eyes. You sure this is it, Casey? I whispered, clutching my backpack straps. My eyes darted from the road behind us to the park's remains. Its broken structures look like the bleached ribs of some ancient, dead monster. I didn't want to do this. My dad would kill me if I got caught trespassing. KC, though, practically bounced. Dude, obviously, this is prime urbex. Seriously, Tommy, you're going to back out now. After all that talk about adventures, he gestured at the slides, their silhouettes jagged against the distant town's dim glow. Besides, the homeless dude said, look for the section where the fence is pushed in. See, he pointed to a sagging section of chain link, an obvious entry point, the bent metal glinting ominously in the moonlight. It's fine, bro. Nobody gives a shit anymore. Justin, ever the chill one, clapped me on the shoulder. He's right, man. It's just an abandoned water park. What's the worst that could happen? We trip over a rogue flip-flop. He let out a giggle, his phone already out, flashlight beam cutting a path through the gloom. It revealed glimpses of faded, peeling murals of cartoon animals. Their eyes seemed to follow us. I swore the smile on one faded octopus mural stretched before settling back into its original shape as I looked directly at it. All right, I mumbled, shaking my head. Casey grinned, pulling at the bent wire, widening the gap. Come on, first one past the old concession stands gets bragging rights. We slipped through the fence, one by one, onto what used to be a busy pathway, now cracked and swallowed by weeds. The air hung heavy with the cloying scent of stale water and dying leaves. The once bright slides overhead now looked like the hollowed-out bones of something long dead. A coldness shot through me. This was nothing like the pictures. This was bizarre. The silence was absolute, broken only by our footsteps. Holy shit, Justin breathed, his phone flashlight slicing through the shadows. This is wild. Told you, Casey said, heading deeper into the park. He glanced back, a glint in his eye, stopping to hold the flashlight beneath his chin. The maw, anyone. The maw, the park's infamous final attraction. For months our town whispered about it. Rumors flew, dark assumptions made about what had happened, why the park shut down. All anyone knew was that hell broke loose not long ago after Sterling bought the statue. Few people had ridden it, all with different experiences, and after a while, it became more urban legend than something real. Since Sterling was gone, no one had answers, so everyone just had fun with it. I'd always been timid with spooky stories, so the thought of investigating the legend didn't sound super enticing. Maybe let's just stick to the regular slides, for bragging rights. Justin just laughed, too loud in the oppressive silence around us. Nah, where's the fun in that? Everyone knows the maw's the real fucking reason to come here. He and Casey sped up, their silhouettes swallowed by the darkness. Being left behind in the lobby felt worse than whatever was waiting inside. So I took a breath and caught up with them. We moved like ghosts. The lazy river was a green, thickened trench, its fountains dry and crusted. Plastic flamingos protruded from the ground, their colors faded to a sick off-white. The wave pool was a debris magnet, littered with sticks, leaves, and dead insects. Everything felt wrong, not just abandoned, but dormant, as if something was waiting, unfurling itself, deep within its concrete veins, becoming aware of our presence. Then I froze, my light fixed on something ahead. Fucking shit, dude. There it was, looming in the distance, partially hidden in shadows, was a tall, twisting slide tube, cracked from top to bottom. Its bottom emptied into a circular pool, once filled with clear water, now an empty, gaping wound in the park's center. Even from where we stood, it was clear. It was an abyss. The sign above, bolted onto a steel pole, had triangular shapes carved out, resembling bite marks. A massive, gray fin emerged from its top left corner. The letters, boxy and wide, peeked through dirt and dust, aged and faded shades of white and blue. The maw. Dude, no fucking way, Justin whispered, his jokes gone. That slide's bigger than it looks in the pictures online. I know, Casey breathed, awe in his voice. You think it's still there, fellas? Only one way to find out. Justin's words felt hollow. Something was not right, but I couldn't back out now. They'd never let me forget it. If I had come this far just to quit, all I could do was swallow my fear, trying to regain what little control I had. Okay, but let's not get too close. Something in that pool smells really fucking bad. We crept closer, taking in the decrepit surroundings. As we passed the old ticket booth, a discarded mirror lay face up on the concrete, its glass cloudy and cracked. I looked down at my reflection and froze. For a fraction of a second, my features elongated, my jaw warped into a curled grin that stretched far beyond my ears, my teeth becoming sharp and jagged. I blinked. My reflection was normal. I snapped my neck to see if either of them had seen it, but they were already trailing ahead, their words prideful, while discussing how awesome our story was going to be. We walked a few more yards towards the pool's edge. As we got closer, I noticed something low on the slide's decaying side, near where it emptied riders into the pool, was a small, dark stain. It wasn't algae or rust. It looked almost dark, like dried blood. I frowned, my gaze lingering on it, unease tightening in my throat. Casey, though, was already focused on the pool's empty depth, his excitement overriding any sense of foreboding that only I felt. We reached the pool's edge, our flashlights dancing along the disgusting few inches of water that had stayed managed through stay along the bottom. The water was still, an oily, gray-black color that seemed to absorb the light rather than reflect it. As our trio of lights trailed along the floor, we saw it, and we couldn't believe what we were seeing. Fuck, you guys, it's actually still here. Casey's eyes were wide with excitement as we studied this thing. Even in its broken state, it was intimidating. Its skin, once a cool blue-gray, was now faded and streaked with orange rust, like a forgotten tombstone. Real barnacles clung to its snout and dorsal fin, remnants from its aquatic origin of the lake. The water level was exactly where its jaw met the metal track beneath it, allowing us to see the rails. Its mouth was frozen in that creepy, disgusting smile. The eyes, black voids, seemed to stare directly at us. Come on, Casey squealed, starting to climb down, using the ladder bolted to the pool side. Justin was anything but enthusiastic about crawling into the sludge. Casey, are you insane? Look at the water. Flesh-eating bacteria. You dumb fuck. How else are we supposed to have proof? We did this then. Shit breath. We each take a picture with it. God, why did you two even agree to this? Tommy has been a spouting bitch fits since we got here. Now you're gonna puss out too. Justin and I locked eyes, neither of us wanting to step forward, but with shared hesitation, we nodded and slowly made our way to the ladder. As we got closer, the surface seemed to bulge inward near the center, like an eye slowly opening beneath the surface before settling back into its oily flatness. I felt dizzy and could feel the acid burn the back of my throat as I choked back the buffalo wings I had for lunch. What the fuck am I doing here? I murmured to myself, Every instinct screamed at me to climb back up, but Justin was already halfway down the ladder, grumbling about tetanus, and Casey was losing his shit at the bottom, aiming his phone at the maw for all the TikToks he was going to make. "Dude, this is so fucking cool," Casey called out. I forced myself down the cold, slimy rungs, my gaze fixed on the maw. Up close, it was grotesque. I almost felt ashamed for being scared of an inanimate object, but I couldn't help the dread I felt that only kept getting stronger the longer I was in its presence. Justin moved closer, his feet sloshing, as he nearly lost his balance. Jesus, it stinks and feels like snot. He was right. The smell was overpowering now, so much so that it made my throat burn. Casey, oblivious as always, was already wrestling Justin into position. "Come on, Justin, put your head in its mouth." Justin grimaced, but leaned in, positioning his head between the shark's jaws, and held his breath from the smell. Casey snapped a photo, the flash briefly illuminating the hollow of the pool, turning the maw into a grinning shadow puppet against the cracked concrete. "Oh my God, if I edit this and add blood around your shoulder." Justin had finally had enough and cut him off as he walked back beside us, the maw just a few feet away, now invisible to us without our lights. "Casey, it fucking stinks in here, man. Let's finish this bullshit and go before we all die from Ebola or something." Casey rolled his eyes as he ignored Justin's outburst and gestured at me to start moving. "Tommy, get your ass over there." My legs felt heavy, as if the water was trying to pull me down. I took a reluctant step towards the maw. Its eyes seemed to draw me in. I stood 2 feet, trying to look anywhere but its face, and slowly leaned in, forcing a strained smile. The flash popped, blinding me for a moment. "Fuck yeah," Casey crowed, lowering his phone to review the shot. "Now we've got proof. We were actually..." His voice hitched, his smile faded, his brows furrowed, as I watched his face change, the air heavier, and I knew for certain that my gut had been right all along. Something definitely wasn't right. Balls of steel, Casey stood frozen, phone clutched, eyes locked on the screen. His body went rigid, his cocky smirk vanished, and it was replaced by horror. I glanced at Justin, who looked back at me, my thoughts own, reflecting back to me through his eyes. "Casey," he said, "what's wrong?" Casey didn't answer. He just stood there, still, rooted in the water, eyes wide, fixed on the photo. He breathed in shallow, rapid gasps. I couldn't see the screen, but the fear radiating off Casey was almost enough to make me run for the exit. Again, the sick smell intensified and stung in my nostrils. Then, Casey lifted his phone, turning the screen just enough for us to see. There I stood, next to the monster, but the photo had glitched. My face, my entire body, was a hazy blur, distorted just enough to know it's me, but my features were impossible to define. However, the maw was terrifyingly clear, the corners of its mouth revealing something that definitely wasn't there before. A coat of what looked like dripping saliva, glistening between rows of its bone-white teeth. A huge contrast from the decayed rust color we just saw in front of us. Its skin was now a vibrant and healthy gray, textured and slick, reflecting the bottom of the slide above us. It wasn't until I looked at the eyes that I felt the world, and my heart stopped simultaneously. Its eyes were now bright and alive, slightly squinted into a devilish shape. No longer the lifeless, deadpan stare straight ahead. They were now at a downward angle, hyper-focused on one thing. Its eyes were hungrily looking down at me. Justin began to laugh. "That's amazing, dude. Bravo." Casey was still frozen, eyes wide, staring at the photo in bewilderment. I didn't. How do you even Photoshop something that fast? Justin, I swear I didn't do anything. His voice was cut off by a vibration that seemed to emanate from the ground beneath us. It was low, but it created a silence where you could hear a pin drop. As we huddled, we slowly lifted our lights back over to the mall. It stood there, its expression emotionless, just as it had always had been. The eyes were dull. There was no glistening saliva, no sharp teeth, nothing. It was the feeling in the atmosphere that was suddenly different. The smell of decay was now overwhelming, not just from the water, but something deeper, muskier, like wet, rotting meat. And the silence wasn't just the absence of sound anymore. It was accompanied by a presence, a silence that felt like something was listening, holding its breath. "Let's get the fuck out of here." Justin's voice was less sarcastic, as he too clearly felt the shift in energy. Casey, still clutching his phone, slowly, reluctantly, dragged his eyes away from the screen, his terror-stricken face finally breaking free from its stupor. Yeah, let's go." We shuffled backward, our eyes glued to the mall, unwilling to turn our backs on it. Every movement felt sluggish, the water clinging to us, resisting our escape. The putrid, rotting meat smell was now thicker than ever, and it tasted metallic on my tongue. My lungs burned with each breath. As we reached the opposite side, hoping for another way out, I slammed my hand against the cold concrete wall. It was just a curved, slick surface, impossible to climb. There was no other ladder, no indentations, nothing to grab onto. We were trapped. Then I looked at the dark, oily water at the base of the maw, just beneath the surface, where the bottom of its huge, stretched jaw met the murky depths. A faint shimmer pulsed. It was subtle, barely there. A heartbeat, like rhythm, that seemed to writhe with an invisible life. It pulsed, slow and deliberate. Justin, seeing the shimmer too, let out a choked whimper. He stumbled back from the ladder, splashing in the grime. It's doing something. Oh my God. Guys, it's fucking breathing. Casey grabbed Justin's arm, pulling him. "Move. We'll try the other side of the pool." The air was now pressing us down, making it hard to breathe. I swept my flashlight beam frantically around the pool's rim, searching, pleading for an escape. But there was nothing, just the walls, grime, and the darkness above. And as my light swept back towards the maw, its eyes narrowed and the smile stretched. It was gone with a blink of my eye, but I know what I saw, and I knew what was happening. The maw was playing with us now, and it had just closed the last exit. Suddenly, the smell exploded. It punched into my nose, my throat, stealing the air. I doubled over, coughing, gagging on the taste. My eyes slammed shut, watering. At the same instant, a feeling of the most intense cold slammed into me. Bone-deep, paralyzing ice. My body spasmed, shivering violently, and my teeth chattered. The vibration escalated through the water, up my legs, into my skull. It was everywhere, disorienting me, blurring my thoughts, and then I dropped my phone, plunging myself into darkness. I stumbled, splashing water, my hands flailing in the void. The combined assault was too much, and I collapsed on my side in defeat. I lost all track of time, all sense of direction. I was a trembling mess, struggling to breathe. Then, as suddenly as it came, the cold lifted. I stayed down on my side, still gasping and shaking. My eyes slowly fluttered open. I fumbled for my phone when the screen flickered to life, its weak glow doing little to pierce the dark. The maw loomed yards away, partially hidden in the shadows, facing me, but the rest of the pool was empty. Justin and Casey were gone. No sound, no struggle, no trace. They had vanished. It was just me and the maw. My body felt numb and detached. The last thing I remembered was the cold, the darkness, the death stench, and then nothing. I don't know how long I was out. I honestly thought I was already dead. I blinked. My eyelids were so fucking gritty that it burned. I was lying in the filth, feeling it soaking through my clothes, and my head throbbed. I tried to sit up, but my muscles screamed in protest. Every movement sent a jolt of pain through my body. Then I heard it. Somewhere behind me, I heard a splash, like something heavy falling into the water behind me, and it started to move towards me with purpose. Then something moved, its dark shape, just at the edge of my blurry vision. It was too large and solid to be debris. It was moving towards me, faster now, the sounds growing louder. I began to panic. I tried to scream, but my voice was too weak. My body wouldn't move or wouldn't respond. I was trapped, helpless, waiting for whatever was coming to get me. Oh my God, kid. Hey kid. I thought I was hallucinating again. I heard a man's voice grow closer, and I felt two hands on my back as his silhouette came into view above me. Thank God. Don't worry, buddy. You're safe now. Okay. Huh. I could only whisper. You and your friends are all over the news. I thought I was too late, but thank God, you're alive. He embraced me not as any stranger would. I could tell that he knew. Somehow, he knew everything. I'm going to get you out of here, but we have to go now. Where are the others? I don't know. We will find them, but we need to get out of the pool. Follow me. He led me to a ladder that we all must have missed in the chaos, but I could have sworn it wasn't there before. Just as the mysterious man helped me pull myself up and steady myself on my feet as we made our escape, we heard it, coming from behind where the man stood. A click, the undeniable sound of teeth clicking together. I could now see the man's face in the streaks of the light he was holding at his side. The horror in his eyes was one of familiar dread, as if he knew what was about to happen next. He had heard that sound before. Once again, the ground started to softly vibrate, and the same dark coldness from before began to rise around us. With a warning-laced and desperate command, he spoke only one more word before the cold started to consume him. Run. Recently, I met a medium who promised me proof. Read this to the end, and you will believe too. I'm sitting on a sofa in a cramped, messy room. The carpet is faded and stained, the wallpaper peeling, and spots of mold speckle the ceiling. Everything about this old house screams disrepair. Next to me on the sofa, an old man with sagging, papery skin sits staring at an empty chair in the corner. A younger man, somewhere in his 30s, in a suit with the slick haircut and white smile of a dentist, or maybe a realtor, flashes his pearly whites at the old man and says, "Hello, sir. My name is Nathan. I'm a spiritual medium. Your family reached out to me and asked for my services. Can you tell me some of what you've been experiencing?" "She's there," growls the old man, still staring at the empty chair in the corner. "Who's there?" Nathan, the medium, glances at the chair. Back to the old man. "Who is it you see sitting in that chair?" He sniffs, wrinkles up his mouth in a frown. "Dunno her name. For the record, I don't believe in any of this stuff. I am here because I don't believe. I'm also recording this entire interaction. The old man, the medium, the invisible woman in the chair in the corner. I make sure to get the chair. Lots of footage of it. I am tempted to get up and go sit in it. But that would ruin this whole charade, wouldn't it? Anyway, I just keep filming. Nathan, the smarmy medium who should be a realtor, looked confused when he first looked at the empty chair, but is now playing along, full woo-woo psychic mode, saying stuff like, to the woman in the chair, "Can I ask what you are doing here? What is it you would like to communicate?" Silence, and Nathan asks the old man, "Do you see any change in her?" The old man shakes his head. She's just sitting there. A few minutes more of a lot of nothing. The medium decides to cast a blessing on the room to help put her spirit to rest. And then the old man sits up straight. His eyes go big. He says, "She's getting up." Then she's laughing. She's cursing at us. Then he starts whimpering. "She's coming closer. She's coming. She's coming. Stop her." He starts screaming, and the medium leaps up, chanting words of a prayer in what is probably Google translated Latin. He waves a hunk of burning sage and sprinkles salt while the old man screams. I get the whole thing on my phone. The screaming, the sage, the sweat on Nathan the medium's brow as he shouts with increasing ferocity over the old man's howls, snarling at the empty chair. And when the moment is right, I yell, "Cut!" The old man stops screaming. His face breaks into a grin as he turns to me. "How was that, Max?" "Brilliant, Pete. You were brilliant," I say, angling my phone toward myself and also speaking to the cameras we have set up to catch the psychic at work. I speak to my future audience, you all, who should subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. This is Pete, an actor. I'm Max, host of Debauchery and Debunkery, where we used to take a shot for each lie, but quickly realized we get drunk way too fast. Now, we just debunk stuff and get drunk later while laughing about it. The only person who is not an actor here is Nathan the medium, who, as you can see, quickly began speaking to an empty chair. "Nathan, you stated several times that you could sense the presence in the chair. What do you have to say now that you know Pete here is an actor?" Nathan has lost his charm. He stammers, red-faced, furious at having been set up, looking between me and Pete and the chair, as if unsure which of us is the most to blame for his predicament. He insists his powers are genuine and babbles that there is a spiritual energy in the chair, while I go on to remark about how the chair itself is from Target. We bought it this morning. So was there spiritual energy at the department store before we brought it in? He says it must be with the house then. I tell him how the house itself is a set. It's actually my house, and I live here. And this entry room doesn't usually look like this. We made it grubbier for effect. Though, I add, I guess you're right. There's not the greatest vibes. Feng Shui has always been a little off in here. And I do need to replace the carpet. The stains are real. The mold spots on the ceiling are fake. You get the idea. Call me Max, short for Maxine, or Maximilian, depending on my mood. I'm currently Nathan the medium's worst nightmare. What you are doing is entrapment, he snarls, his ruddy red face on the verge of tears. Oh, his business is gonna take a hit, all right. He keeps barking at me. You act so sanctimonious, but this bullshit is hurting people. You're hurting people by dismissing their beliefs, disrespecting the spiritual. I laugh at him. I'd say that's exactly what you're doing by taking advantage of people, just like you tried with Pete. Here, I bet you go into schools and debunk Santa Claus to the little kids. How telling that you compare what you do to lying to children. So you know you're lying. You just think it's okay. because they're feel-good lies. You know what? Make fun all you want, but this stuff is real. You're a fool to mess with it. He turns and storms out. My last shot of him is both middle fingers held up. His dramatic exit is marred almost immediately by his return moments later, his face now blank as thrusts a business card into my hand. For skeptics, he says, call her, and she'll make you believe. Thanks for the tip, Nathan. Probably won't, though. It usually doesn't work when people know ahead of time. Call her. She will make you believe, he repeats again before turning on his heel and striding out. I look at the card. It just says, make believe on one side, and on the other is an eye and a number. The eye has a nifty effect, where it appears to always be looking at you. The card is matte black, with simple lettering. I tuck it in my pocket. A few days later, Nathan the medium contacts me via text. The episode has already aired. I'm sure Nathan is pissed about it. No doubt, he's getting a lot of emails and calls. He's getting roasted in the comments. So is messaging me. It's not surprising. Probably to beg me to remove it, offer to bribe me. I've had all kinds of things. His message, when I open it, surprises me. Forget what I said about the card. Just throw it away, please. Now, I've always been a contrarian. Had forgotten about the card until that moment. But of course, after his request, I go digging it up. The matte black, the eye, the words, make believe, and the number to call. I call it, out of curiosity, making sure to record the call. So I'll have material later for an episode if this turns into anything. There's no ringing, just a voice, connecting almost immediately. The address is redacted. Come if you want to believe. Corny, probably not worth the effort of a debunk, but the address isn't too far from my sister's house, and I have to visit her anyway to help her with a few things and talk about my brother-in-law. He's battling cancer. I make a note about it, and the next day, before I head over to see my sister, I swing by the address. It takes a while to find. A small, psychic reading shop. More of a nook, really. Tucked between a bakery and a bookstore. You have to go down a set of stairs to even find the door, and the room is so small, it feels like stepping into a janitor's closet. The woman inside is neither old nor young. She's somewhere between 30 and 50. An unremarkable bird of a woman with beady dark eyes and hair like a crow's wings. Glossy black with a bluish sheen. Must be dyed. She's sitting in a chair in the corner in a long black gown, stiff as a doll that's been posed. She has only one eye, which follows me as I step in and sit down in the chair opposite her. The other eye is shrouded in shadow. Also, the lights in here are very low. It's a nice effect, hokey, but visually arresting. Props to her for atmosphere. Minus a few points for being so cliché. Hello, Max, says the woman. So Nathan obviously did give her the heads up. So much for debunking. Even so, I ask her if I can record. She cackles a little and motions for me to go ahead. So I take out my phone and start recording us both. Though I don't have much hope for anything from this given. She's already been prepped for me by Nathan. Still, why not? I clear my throat and say, I'm told you can make anyone believe. Sure, she agrees. Okay, make me believe. Her head cocks, raven-like, and she examines me. Her eye drifts to the camera. Is this really what you want, Max? To be made to believe? Me and my viewers, and your viewers. Again, that throaty chuckle. How nice. All right then, Max, the debunker. I'll make a bargain with you. In 5 days, if I've made you believe, you publicly announce your belief before you end yourself and your channel. If you still don't believe in 5 days, nothing happens to you. The sheer gall of this lunatic, I can't help smiling. And myself, in my channel, I echo. That's the worst bargain I've ever heard. Why would I agree to that? Because you don't believe. You believe you won't believe. And you're an arrogant shit who wants clicks. And making this bargain will give them to you. She makes actually a very good point. Also, she's right. I absolutely do not believe. I say as much to my camera, and then say, okay, crazy lady, fine, I accept your bargain, but just recording this to note that I have no plans to commit suicide, and if I appear to do so, and this lady has murdered me, I expect her to be arrested. She just looks at me with a flat, black eye. So how are you going to make me believe? I ask. Tell me the names of 3 people. She grunts. Kenji, I say, my brother-in-law. He dies on Friday, she says. Loses his battle with cancer. My condolences. Wow, okay. Obviously, you did your research. It's called a hot reading, when a purported psychic will look up information about a subject before the reading and then recite facts about them that seem astonishing to the audience. Nathan told her I was coming, so she obviously looked up my brother-in-law and his condition. My brother-in-law could pass at any time. Friday is very specific, but it's not a bad gamble. I find it in poor taste. She throws out his death so casually, though, wagering her whole charade on his ill health. That one's too easy, she says, as if agreeing with my thoughts. Who else? Sarah, my sister, who is going through it right now with Kenji's illness. She shakes her head. Nothing much happens to her in the next 5 days, except for grieving her husband. Name someone else. What? Number? You said I could name anybody. I named Sarah. You can't make a prediction for her. She sighs and rolls her eyes. It's your episode, Max. There are plenty of more interesting options, but fine. Your sister Sarah forgets a bag of groceries and has to go back for it. Inside are 2 apples, some herbal medicine your brother-in-law requested that she'll never get a chance to deliver to him, and chocolates for you. This is all so specific. Already, I'm thinking of how it could be staged. Could this woman bribe one of the store workers at the co-op my sister shops at? Or maybe this make-believe woman has got a bug in her ear now. Someone is whispering stuff to her, and they've been watching Sarah, and the shopping has already happened. I'm still considering how elaborate this might be, or if she's just doing what most of these scammers do, lie. The woman says, I'll pick the 3rd person because you're about to say Mateo. And yes, his wife is cheating on him. You'll say it's too easy for me to have guessed. You think I have an accomplice listening and feeding me clues. So instead, let's pick Pete. In 3 days, he has a heart attack from seeing her. Seeing who? The woman in the chair. Her lips curve in a ghastly smile. Pete the actor. There's no woman in any chair. I paid him to make her up. He'll call you in 3 days, and he'll tell you he's been seeing her. He'll beg you to make her go away. He'll warn you. He'll plead. He's an actor, I snap. Did you hire him? He'll say that he knew you'd say that. He'll beg you to believe him, but you won't. Well, this last one sounds easy enough to stage. Anyway, though if they can make the stuff happen with my sister, I'll be both really impressed and probably filing a lawsuit for stalking. As for my brother-in-law, it's disgusting they'd even talk about him that way. Oh, Max, she says, as I am leaving, take my card. I love referrals. Refer me to someone else, and maybe I'll make them believe in your place. Whatever, I growl and step out of the place. ascending the stairs into the bright sun. She makes my skin crawl. Not because she's connected to the occult, but because she's a charlatan who lies without any sense of moral compunction. A parasite feeding on people's superstitions. I've made it my career to expose people like her. These kinds of scammers are the reason my father ended up losing so much money, destitute and desperately believing that the woman, if she even was a woman, catfishing him, was in love with him. He believed she was planning to elope with him until he succumbed to COVID during the pandemic. Exposing the lies can't bring him back or undo the harm that was caused to our family, but it might prevent someone else from falling for a similar scheme. When I get home, I review the footage of my encounter with the make-believe woman and decide that next week I'll splice it with some footage of all her predictions not coming true. It'll make a decent short reel, I guess, though not dissimilar from other reels where I've exposed frauds. I save the footage and forget about it. 2 days later, on Friday, my brother-in-law's passing coincides with the first prediction, but his death was already foretold by the doctors, and I dismiss the coincidence. For the rest of the day, I am talking to family. I console my sister, Sarah. I spend the night and check in on her every few hours. She has barely stopped crying and hasn't eaten anything. The next day, I'm still trying to console her when my phone rings. It's from an unsaved number. I don't pick up, but it rings, and she tells me through tears it's fine, to please go and answer it. So I do. It is Pete, the actor. Max, rasped Pete. Max, thank God. She said she'll count you as a referral. You have to make her go away. Who? I ask. Annoyance, like an ice pick in my brain, because I already know who. Already suspect. The woman, he bursts, all but sobbing. The one in the chair. I can't believe it. This make-believe lady actually did it. She actually reached out to Pete. Paid him whatever she paid him. Not much, probably. He's an amateur actor we found on Instagram. Honestly, one of the reasons we hired him is because he came cheap. And now he's turned his shtick on me. I sigh. Yeah, very funny. Listen, I know who hired you. She said you'd say that. He bursts. She said you wouldn't believe me, but you have to. Max, you have to. Okay, look, this is inappropriate. My brother-in-law just died. I need to take care of family matters. You have to believe. Max, you're the only one who can save me. You have to believe before tonight. Call her and tell her you believe, or I hang up the phone, frustrated, and then I silence it as it immediately rings again. My sister looks up from her chair, eyes red, perplexed. Max, she asks. Who was? Nobody. Just an actor I worked with on a gig. Nothing to worry about. I sigh, looking at my silenced phone. It's still ringing. There are also pictures coming through via text and messages. Pictures from the photo shoot. All of the empty chair. Can't you see her? He keeps texting. More empty chair pictures. The man is dedicated. I'll give him that. He's a much better actor than I initially gave him credit. Probably should have paid him more. I block his number and forget about him. Forget about him, that is, until the next day. I'm helping my sister to put things away around the house. The place is a mess, and everything reminds her of Kenji. As I unpack a tote bag on the counter, I pull out a couple of chocolate bars. I ask if I can have one, and she calls from her place, listless on the couch. Yeah, I got those for you. Oh, really? Thank you. Sure. I pull a box of an herbal supplement out. My heart thumps in my chest. This is only a coincidence, I think. I clear my throat and call. What do you want me to do with this herbal concoction? Huh? Supplements for. Looks like it helps with digestion and gut health. Oh, She goes very quiet and then says, I got that for Kenji. I don't know. Oh, I don't want to ask. I don't want to. And I loathe the butterflies in my stomach, the way my throat is dry and constricted as I ask her, did you forget the bag? Huh? The herbal medicine. When you were out shopping for him, did you leave the bag? Yeah, actually. She wipes tears from her eyes. I've just been so out of it. How did you know I left it? I don't answer. My heart is hammering now as I go to my phone, search for Pete's number, try to call, but there is no answer. I turn to my sister. Maybe the cashier kept the bag by accident, I say. Maybe they set it behind the counter, so you didn't notice when you walked away. She's too distraught over Kenji to engage with me. Doesn't understand why I care about the bag. Could have been tucked behind the counter, she echoes. I cling to that thought. The make-believe woman bribed the cashier to hide the bag, and then to put items in it that my sister would normally buy. How else would the make-believe woman have known exactly what items would be in there? These scammers, I tell you, blood-sucking. It's insane the lengths they go to. But just in case, I retreat to the spare room, open my laptop, and check the footage of my recording with the make-believe woman. Check the date. She told me I had 5 days. Tomorrow will be 5. I have time. I repeat to myself, wondering why I'm being so uncharacteristically irrational when none of this is real. I paid Pete. I know he's acting. Why the fuck hasn't he called back? I call again. No answer. I go to YouTube and pull up the debauchery and debunkery video I released about Nathan, the phony medium. My heart settles as I watch it. The medium talking about his craft. This fucking fraudster. He goes on about establishing a psychic connection and how time is all wibbly-wobbly. Pretty sure he cribbed that from some sci-fi show. And as a consequence, he can see snippets from the future. It's all nonsense. I feel the comfort of the familiar, my skepticism sliding back into place. The camera shots of my house, the stage front room, the peeling wallpaper and everything. And there's Pete, sitting on the sofa, pretending. I can't wait for him to get to the part where I call, cut, and he reveals he's acting the whole time. That's what I need to see to feel better. Hello, sir. My name is Nathan, says Nathan on screen, introducing himself to Pete. I'm a spiritual medium. Your family reached out to me and asked for my services. Can you tell me some of what you've been experiencing? She's there, says Pete. Who's there? Asks Nathan the medium, while Pete the actor keeps staring and says he doesn't know her name. And then my camera, zooming in on the chair. Number. Fuck me. No. I freeze the frame. Number. What the fuck? Number. She's there, staring out at me from the screen, staring through the screen, right at the camera. The woman from the psychic reading shop. The video proceeds as normal, the same as before, exactly as we recorded. My blood is pumping so loud, I can barely hear myself think. My pulse raging, drowning out the dialogue in the video as the medium leans forward and asks what the woman is doing now. Pete says she's just sitting there. The camera pans back to the empty chair, but it's not empty. The woman is sitting in it. The camera returns to Nathan the medium as he gets up and begins performing a blessing on the room until suddenly Pete sits up straight on the sofa and announces, she's getting up. She's laughing. My throat constricts. My heart sledgehammers my ribs so hard, I think I might go into cardiac arrest. The phone camera remains trained on Pete, on his hammy acting. Only now, instead of looking hammy, he looks genuinely terrified. He really is a better actor than I gave him credit. I hear my own voice, chuckling under my breath on the recording, trying not to giggle at what I evidently thought was a great performance by our actor. And then finally, my phone pans back to the chair. I scream aloud, in my room by myself, and jerk back from my laptop. The woman is standing, lurching toward the camera, toward me. She's coming closer. Pete's voice screams on the recording. I'm cowering on the floor, gasping as the woman steps nearer, nearer to the camera, her face swallowing the screen. "Cut!" shouts my voice. Then everything is back to normal. The woman on the video is gone. There's only Nathan, red-faced and ashamed, as Pete and I tease him. I hear my own arrogant voice. I'm Max, host of Debauchery and Debunkery, where we used to take a shot for each lie, but quickly realized we get drunk way too fast. I slam my hand on the laptop to shut it, but then something occurs to me. If the woman was really there, if I wasn't seeing things, others must have noticed her too. I pull open the laptop again and skim the YouTube comments, all ordinary, and my heartbeat settles until I scroll to the most recent comments. Specifically, there's a bunch left by the user, Pete Hamsitup. It's the handle for our actor, and he has commented over and over, Pete Hamsitup, I believe. 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 I check Pete's Instagram account, the one we hired him from. His account is gone, deleted. I call Pete, and while the phone rings, Max, the door bursts open, and my sister says, "Max, everything okay?" She's come because she heard me screaming over the video. "Can you see her?" I ask, trying not to hyperventilate, as I turn my laptop toward her, rewinding the video to just before the cut. "Can you see anyone in the chair?" "What? No, it's just an empty chair. Max, what's going on?" But I push past her without answering. I need to get home, need to get to that staged front room. "Max," my sister shouts, as I slam the door behind me. I try calling Pete again, as I pull out of the driveway. His phone just keeps ringing. I call and call, then drop the phone, swearing as I nearly pancake a pedestrian. I'm so distraught. The pedestrian screams obscenities as I screech by. My phone rings again, and I pick it up wildly, wondering if it's Pete. But it's my sister, worried about me. I lie that I'm fine, running a red light and careening along residential streets, and finally screeching into my driveway. And I leap out, rushing up the front steps, through the porch, and into the stage living room area. See the chair, still empty. Thank God, everything still the same as on the day of Nathan the medium's visit. Nathan, I need to call Nathan. "Nathan," I burst as the call connects. It's Max from Debauchery and Debunkery. "I need you to make her stop. I pause, stammering over my next words, and grit my teeth and make myself say, "I'll take down the debunk video. I'll say you were right. Just make her stop." "Do you believe?" comes the tinny voice on the phone. "Sure, fine. Just make her stop. If you believe," says the voice, "you must publicly announce your belief before you end yourself and your channel." What? The blood in my veins turns to ice as I remember the deal, that absurd deal. If I believe, I end my channel and myself. If I don't believe, nothing happens. "So Max, you'll be fine if you don't believe," says the small, rational voice in my head. If I don't believe, as long as I'm still a skeptic, But tears start into my eyes, the phone shaking in my fingers, because I'm looking at my texts and there's a new one from Pete. Hello, this is Jay on my grandfather's phone. He had a heart attack yesterday and passed away. Scrolling up to the previous text, it's just the picture he sent, over and over again of the chair. But now, I see her. I fucking see her. And now I can't make myself unsee her. I can't. And I'm certain that when finally I see her in the flesh again and my 5 days are over, I'll end my account and myself. And oh, fuck me. How do I stop it? Please help me. I whimper into the phone. Nathan's voice cackles, only it doesn't sound like Nathan. I sink down to the floor in despair, and that's when I find it on the carpet. That matte black card of hers, black like the blackest void in the universe. Except those words, make believe, and in the picture of the eye, looking at me and the number. And I remember, she likes referrals. I still have a few hours left to find someone else. So I'm making this final post. Please, are you a skeptic? You think I'm making this all up? That it's just nonsense? That I'm I'm an actor. Perfect. Okay, please, listen. I believe, and I need you to look her up. I need you to call her. Call this number. Redacted. Call her. And no matter how skeptical you are, she'll make you believe. But I beg you to do it soon. Now. Call her now. Now. I promise she'll make you believe.
My wife has been peeking at me from around corners and behind furniture. It's gone from weird to terrifying. My wife, Lynn, and I have been together for 6 years and married for 11 months. Our entire history together has been very normal, and never once have I noticed any weird behaviors or red flags. I can't stress enough how out of character this whole thing is for her. Lynn is very kind, intelligent, and thoughtful. She's always been the no-nonsense type of person. Being childish or trying to scare me is not something she'd normally do. She doesn't even like watching horror movies. When we first started dating, she agreed to watch The Shining with me because she knew how much I loved horror. She was so scared that she didn't even make it through half of the movie before we had to turn it off. She isn't into anything creepy and has never been into pranks. It's just not her cup of tea. And that's fine. But that's what was so strange about this. It's just so unlike her. I should also add that she never had any mental health issues, and as far as I'm aware, it doesn't run in her family. I know some people are able to hide their mental health problems, but in the 6 years we've been together, I think I'd have seen some sort of sign. 2 months ago, I was in the kitchen making myself some coffee before work. I was running a bit late that morning and knew I wouldn't be able to make it to Dunkin' Donuts for my usual morning fix. I took a sip of my coffee as I hurried down the hall towards the front door, when I happened to notice Lynn peeking at me from around the corner ahead of me. I could only see her eyes, and a strand of her long dark hair hanging against the wall. The rest of her body was concealed behind the corner. I nearly spilled my coffee when I saw her. I did burn the shit out of my lips. "Geez, Lynn," I said, wiping a few drops of coffee from my pants. "You scared the shit out of me." She immediately popped out of view like a little kid that had been caught. I heard her scurry off towards the living room, and by the time I got to the front door, she was out of sight. It was really weird, and just totally out of character for her, like I said, but I also found it kind of funny that she was being more playful and a little less serious. I shouted that I loved her and called her a weirdo. As I shut the door behind me, I heard her laughing. Her behavior was a bit odd, but it certainly wasn't something to call a priest over. I forgot about it by lunch, and by the time I got home, she was her normal self. I didn't bring it up, and neither did she, and life went on. The next incident happened 3 days later. It was around 2 a.m., and I had woken up to get a drink. I was standing at the kitchen island, jug of Oj in hand, when I felt a strong feeling that I was being watched. For whatever reason, I looked down at the floor and saw my wife's smiling face staring back. She was peeking at me from the other side of the island. staring up at me with wide, unblinking eyes and grinning. Grinning like the Cheshire Cat, I screamed, I'll admit it. Not out of irritation, but fear. For some reason at that moment, I was scared. At the sound of my scream, Lynn scuttled backwards out of my view, her hands and feet smacking the tile floor as she hurried out of the kitchen on all fours. I didn't run after her, or even yell after her. I just stood there frozen in shock, wondering what fuck had possessed her to do that. It took me a little longer than I'd like to admit to go back upstairs, but I eventually did. When I got to our bedroom, Lynn was lying on her side, asleep, or at least pretending to be. I stood there for a while, watching her breathing to be sure she really was asleep. I had the feeling she might jump out at me the moment I got into bed, but she didn't. I climbed into bed, and she didn't even move. Her breathing was soft and deep, and I was starting to wonder if I'd dreamt the whole thing. The next morning, I waited for her to come down for coffee, and after handing her a mug and kissing her cheek, I decided to ask her about it. "What was that about last night?" I asked, keeping my tone light so I didn't offend or embarrass her. She frowned over her cup of coffee, shaking her head like she had no clue what I was referring to. "You were peeking at me again. From over there," I said, pointing to the spot on the floor by the kitchen island. She followed my gaze, and when she looked back at me, she burst out laughing. She laughed so hard that I couldn't help but join her. "You creep me the fuck out sometimes, you know that?" I said. She giggled and set her cup on the counter and wrapped her arms around my neck. "You creep me out all the time, so I guess we're even," she teased. We said our goodbyes and left for work. As I drove, I kept thinking about how creepy it had been seeing her grinning at me from behind the island like that. The sounds her hands made on the floor as she crawled away. I told myself she was just trying to be silly, just trying to join me in my love of all things horror. It's not like I was afraid of her, but it still didn't sit right with me. I started seeing her peeking at me more and more. Sometimes she'd be peeking out from behind the couch or living room curtains. Once she even managed to get inside her grandmother's old trunk that sits at the foot of our bed. I might not have even known she was there at all, had the trunk's old hinges not given her away. She'd had the lid propped up just enough so that only half of her face peeked through. She'd been grinning like an excited toddler. It was unnerving. I didn't even know what to say to her. All I could do was stare. When I finally found my voice, I asked her why on earth was she doing this. She didn't answer, but she had slowly closed the lid, shutting herself inside the trunk. I just walked away, feeling disturbed. I didn't understand why she was doing it, but it clearly made her happy. I just hoped she would tire of the game quickly. Lynn didn't peek at me for the next 2 weeks. I started to think she was done with her weird prank, and I was relieved. We were watching a show on Netflix one night, and I jokingly said that I hadn't seen her peeking at me lately, and that she must have given up on her spy game. She looked up at me with a small smile and said, "Maybe I've just gotten better at it." I didn't say anything, but I wondered whether or not she was joking. For the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about what she'd said. Was she still peeking at me when I wasn't looking and I just hadn't noticed? And if so, what the hell was she getting out of this? I started to feel paranoid, constantly checking whether she was watching from around the corner or behind a door. I was jumpy whenever I was home and she wasn't in full view of me. I felt stupid and a little crazy. But after a few weeks without another incident, I began to relax. I stopped checking behind furniture and walls and told myself it was just a bad memory. Then a few days ago, things got so much worse. Lynn left to go to a friend's, and I lounged on the couch and played a couple games on my laptop. Around 9 p.m., I hopped in the shower, and as I was washing the soap from my hair, I felt that awful feeling that I was being watched. I slowly opened my eyes and almost had a fucking heart attack. Lynn was peeking from behind the shower curtain, her entire head stretched into the shower, leaving just her body outside. Her long dark hair hung against the curtain, the ends dripping with water. Her mouth hung open in a terrible grin, eyes wide and red, as if she hadn't blinked in a while. I screamed and jumped back against the wall. She didn't move, nor did her smile waver. Her makeup ran down her cheeks in 2 black streaks. She looked giddy and completely deranged. I was fucking terrified. We stood like that for a few moments, neither of us saying a word. Finally, after what felt like forever, she slowly pulled her head back out of the shower, and I watched her blurry figure through the curtain as she moved backwards towards the bathroom door. A second later, the bathroom door slammed shut, hard enough to rattle the mirror. I screamed again and jumped out of the shower to lock the door. I stayed inside the bathroom for over an hour. Maybe I overreacted to some of you, but joke or not, I wasn't going to put up with the crazy shit anymore. That's what I kept telling myself as I paced in my bathroom, stopping to listen at the door every few minutes. Suddenly I heard a muffled sound, and I pressed my ear against the bathroom door, straining to listen. I couldn't hear anything, but I envisioned Lynn standing on the other side of the door, giggling at her joke. I felt a surge of anger. I was beyond pissed at being made to feel scared in my own house, and made to hide in the bathroom for an hour. All for what? Some joke? If it was a joke, it was an awful one. "What the fuck, Lynn?" I snapped. "This shit is getting really fucking annoying." I waited for her to apologize or to call me a jerk, but instead I heard a faint moan, so quiet I wondered if I heard it at all, and then complete silence. "Lynn?" I called out, not able to even hide the shakiness in my voice. I got no response, just my own heavy breathing. "I swear to God, just fucking stop it," I yelled, pounding my fist on the door. I waited for her to cuss me out, something I would expect from me talking to her like that. I never screamed at her before, but there was nothing, just the occasional drip from the shower head. I won't deny that I was scared, too afraid to open the damn door and face my own wife. I waited another 30 minutes or so, which feels like a fucking lifetime when you're scared. Finally, I decided I wasn't going to spend the night hiding in my bathroom, so I got down on my knees and peered under the door. I almost expected to see her face peeking back at me, but thankfully I didn't. I could see straight down the hallway to the top of the stairs, but no Lynn. I didn't know if I should be happy about that or not. I looked for a few minutes, waiting to see her head pop up over the top step, but it never came. I stood up, my hand hovering over the door, and mentally prepared myself to open it. I slowly turned the lock with shaky fingers and was about to yank it open when I heard a sound that still makes me feel nauseous when I think about it. A moan, louder than before, but this time I was able to tell just where it was coming from. I turned my head to the closet door as if in slow motion, and locked eyes with my wife, who was peeking out at me from the slight gap. Her eyes were still wide as ever, and her mouth was hanging open in the most grotesque, gaping smile I'd ever seen. I didn't even scream. I was too scared for even that. Her hands were clasped to her chest, body trembling with sheer delight, as if she could barely contain her excitement. A short, raspy moan bubbled up from her throat, deep and raw, sending a shiver through my entire body. Somehow I found the ability to pull the bathroom door open and ran as fast as I could all the way down the steps, snagging my keys and phone from the table in the living room before running outside to my car. I could hear her shrill laughter behind me, but I didn't hear her getting closer. I didn't bother shutting the front door. I drove away from the house faster than I legally should have, shivering the entire time, either from fear or the cold. Maybe a little of both. I hadn't grabbed a coat or even a pair of shoes. I was still in my boxers and my hair was still damp. I drove straight to my brother Chris's house, about 40 minutes away, ignoring any and every call and text I got. I didn't check my phone until I was safely parked in my brother's driveway. Lynn had called 4 times and sent a flurry of texts, all wondering where I'd gone and why I left like that. I threw my phone at the dash in a rage, furious at her nonchalant attitude. My brother and his wife were surprised to see me, especially dressed in just a pair of boxers, but told me to stay as long as I needed. Chris lent me some clothes and asked me what happened. I told him Lynn and I had a fight, but didn't get into the details. I didn't want him to think I was overreacting, leaving my wife over a prank, even if it was a strange one. I mean, hadn't I encouraged her for years to lighten up instead of being so serious all the time? I had wanted her to relax and loosen up, but this was definitely not what I'd had in mind. I tried to sleep on their sofa, but my brain wouldn't let me sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Lynn's face staring at me from inside the closet. Knowing she'd been in there with me the entire time made my skin crawl. She'd never left the fucking bathroom at all. Instead, she slipped inside the closet and slammed the bathroom door shut to fool me. The mere thought of going back home gave me anxiety. I tossed and turned, unable to sleep. Chris ended up giving me a sleeping pill, so I was able to get a little rest. My sleep was filled with terrible dreams, all of Lynn's smiling face. I woke up just as the sun started to rise. My sore body ached from the sofa, and I felt drained. I knew I'd have to call Lynn at some point, but I didn't know what to say to her. I wouldn't be going home unless she gave me her word she'd never do any more creepy shit. I just wanted my wife back. Her normal, serious self never looked so good to me. I was contemplating calling her and telling her that, when that familiar feeling came over me. I was being watched. I was staring at the ceiling, my heart in my throat. I didn't want to look away, but the longer I ignored the feeling, the worse it got. My eyes drifted away from the ceiling almost on their own. Her face was pressed up against the window beside the couch, staring down at me with that same gaping smile. Drool dribbled down her lips, leaving 2 long streaks down the glass. I didn't know how long she'd been there, but something told me she'd been there quite a while, possibly all night. I didn't bother screaming, though I was afraid anger trumped any fear I felt at that moment. I jumped up from the couch and pounded my palm against the glass. "Lynn, are you crazy? What the hell is wrong with you? Just go home," I shouted. "Now!" She didn't move, and her ghastly expression never changed. If anything, her smile only grew, as if she had never been more elated. I could hear Chris and his wife moving around upstairs, as if Lynn could hear them from her place outside. Her head twitched slightly in their direction, and she began to close her mouth slowly. Chris called my name from upstairs, obviously concerned. I turned to see him and his wife Rebecca hurrying down the steps. When I turned back to the window, Lynn was gone. The only sign she'd been there at all was the 2 streaks of drool still dripping down the glass. I tried explaining to Chris and Rebecca about waking up to see Lynn watching me through their window. They were skeptical. Who wouldn't be? Chris and I went outside to the spot in front of the window, but there were no footprints in the dirt, just a slight indent. Animal, probably, Chris guessed, and I didn't argue. He and Rebecca assumed I dreamt the entire episode, but they didn't understand, and I was too tired to explain it to them. I called out of work that day and turned my cell off. I didn't want to face Lynn. Just talking to her was too much for me at that point. I really started to believe something was irreversibly wrong with her, that no matter what promises she made, we'd never be the same again. The thought saddened me to my core. I cried most of the morning. By noon, I figured I was ready to confront her, give her one last chance to explain herself. I could at least give her that after 6 years, I told myself. I turned my phone on and saw the dozens of texts she'd sent, all from a seemingly concerned wife. "Can we talk? I love you. Please call me. I'm really worried. Can you answer? Just come home." And more of the same. All texts telling me she loved me and she wanted me home. How worried she was. Not a damn one addressing the crazy shit she pulled, like she hadn't been acting like a character from a Stephen King book. Even her texts were different. She normally texted novels just to tell me to pick up a loaf of bread. You'd think she'd have more to say to me after her bizarre shenanigans. I know it probably seems childish to some of you who are miles away from this situation, but if you saw the way Lynn had looked at me, how she scampered away on all fours like some wild animal, grinning at me from inside the closet like a lunatic, then I think you'd find my reaction was warranted. I ended up staying with Chris and Rebecca for another night. I didn't wake up yesterday until afternoon, and thankfully I didn't see Lynn's face watching me through the window. I don't want to pry because it's not my place, but is this fight something that can be mended? Rebecca asked. She'd made us both a sandwich for lunch, and I knew she wanted to breach the subject without seeming to be nosy. I don't know, she's like a different person, I said, choosing my words carefully. I still wasn't ready for her or Chris to know the full extent of the batshit craziness I had been dealing with. People change, Ben, but she's still the same woman you married. Maybe you both just need to talk through your issues. Whatever's going on, I'm sure it can be fixed, she said, ever the peacemaker. I think it's beyond that now. I don't think talking would help. I just don't trust her, I said. The words stung in my heart. I missed and loved my wife. But how could I live with someone like that? Living in constant fear didn't sound too appealing. Lynn loves you. She has to be absolutely crushed, she said. I don't know about that, I said. Well, she certainly seemed like it to me. I've never seen her so upset. Very much unlike the Lynn I know, Rebecca said, shaking her head sadly. It took a full minute for her words to really sink in, and when they did, I felt dread worming its way through my skin. Wait, what do you mean? You saw her? You saw Lynn? I asked, my mouth suddenly dry. Rebecca nodded casually, as if that fact wasn't nightmare fuel. Maybe for her it wasn't. She stopped by this morning just after Chris left for work, she said, cleaning the plates from the table. I didn't see her car, though. Maybe she took an Uber or something. Beck, what did she say? Did she come inside? I asked, sweat starting to break out on my forehead. I began looking around, examining corners as though a predator lurked behind them. Number, she just asked if you were awake yet, and I said that you weren't. I asked if she wanted me to wake you, but she said no. Just said to let you sleep, she said as she washed the dishes. That's all? She didn't say anything else? I asked. Number, she looked awful, though, like she hadn't slept in days. I think you should call her. I got up from the table and thanked Rebecca for lunch. I felt a little bit better at the knowledge that at least she hadn't come inside. Still, I needed to double-check that the doors were locked. I sat for a while trying to figure out what to do next. I didn't want to go home, but I felt that I owed it to Lynn to help her if I could. Hadn't I sworn an oath to love and honor her through sickness and in health? Clearly, she was very sick. If she was sick, which I truly believed she was, I had to try and get her the help she needed. But I didn't even know where to start. I didn't want to call the police, and besides, what the hell was I going to tell them? That my wife was peeking at me? That she was being creepy? As bizarre as she'd been, she still hadn't committed any crime. Not yet, anyway. The police would have probably said that I was overreacting. But this wasn't some prank. It felt wrong, dangerous even, like something sinister lurked beneath her smile. I knew as her husband I was well within my rights to have her committed, but what if she simply acted normal in their presence? She'd obviously been able to fool Rebecca into thinking she was just a concerned wife. As long as the doctors didn't find her a danger to herself or others, they'd have no choice but to release her after 72 hours. I felt lost and overwhelmed. So I did what any husband in my position would do. I called her mother. I didn't want to, believe me. Her mother, Marianne, and I were never on the best of terms. We'd never fought or anything like that. She just wasn't a very warm person and wasn't really easy to get along with. She hardly ever smiled, and when she did, only her lips would move into a thin-lipped smile, leaving her eyes as blank as before. She gave off this aura that felt like she was permanently on the offensive. I'd only met her twice, and both times were for such short visits. I got the impression she didn't approve of me for her daughter. Lynn always ushered us out quickly as she didn't want me to feel uncomfortable, which I was grateful for. Being in her mother's company felt almost unbearable, like walking on glass. I was glad when we moved 3 states away so we didn't have to see her often. I was happy to avoid the woman, but I needed her help. I really didn't want to talk to her at all, but I had to talk to someone, and someone who knew Lynn better than I did. So I grit my teeth and did what I had to. Yes, she answered, already sounding irritated. Marianne, it's me, Ben. Do you have a minute to talk? I asked. I could hear her cluck her tongue in irritation. I'm in the middle of writing some checks, but if you insist, I suppose I can spare a moment. What is it that you want to discuss, Benjamin? She said coolly. It's about Lynn. She's been acting strangely, and I was wondering if you had any idea whether there was something. I was quickly interrupted. It's a bit difficult to follow your rambling, Benjamin. What is that you want from me? She asked. I could almost see her standing there in her thin sweater and slacks, tapping her fingernails impatiently on the table. I wanted to know if you'd ever noticed any odd behavior, or possibly any mental health issues, I asked. There was a long, uncomfortable pause that I couldn't tell was because she was just thinking, or something else. Finally, after a few seconds, she spoke. I'm not sure if this is one of your jokes, Benjamin, but if so, I don't find the humor in it. Now, I do have business to attend to, as I've said, so if you don't mind, she said, but I cut her off before she could get rid of me. Marianne, it's not a joke. I'm sincerely concerned about Lynn's mental health. Her behavior has been very erratic lately. I'm very worried about her, and I figured as her mother you would be as well, I said, my frustration evident in my voice. If you're truly concerned, then I suggest you get the health professionals involved. I don't know what you expect of me, she snapped. I could tell she was seconds away from hanging up, and for some reason I was desperate not to let her. I had the feeling that she knew a lot more than she was letting on. Please, if not for me, do it for Lynn. I tried. I heard a faint, shaky intake of breath as if she were trying to hold her steely persona together but failing. Marianne, I started. Benjamin, I don't know what to tell you. My only advice would be to seek professional help. Do not call here again. Goodbye. I tried to call out to her, but she'd hung up. I tried to wrap my head around the call and her refusal to help me. Even if she didn't like me, why wouldn't she want to help her own daughter? I couldn't understand that. I tried to replay the conversation, desperate to find something I missed. After a while, I almost gave up, until I remembered her last words to me. Seek professional help. She'd said those words with a bit of urgency. I could have just been grasping at straws, but no. I was sure her voice had changed ever so slightly when she'd said that, as if they were very important. What had she meant? I assumed she'd been referring to medical professionals, but maybe she was referring to someone else. Someone that she didn't, for some reason, feel comfortable saying directly. Or maybe I was just desperate. I waited for Chris to get home, and after a very long and exhausting conversation with him and Rebecca, I convinced them that Lynn truly needed psychiatric help. I didn't tell them everything. I wasn't prepared to go into it yet, but I told them about our last encounter, how she'd hidden in the bathroom peeking at me from the closet. They were obviously shocked, but thankfully they believed me. They too just wanted to help her. Still, they didn't think it was all that serious. Weird, maybe, but not dangerous. They just kept saying that Lynn had to be playing some kind of weird joke. Maybe for YouTube? Rebecca offered, if only half-heartedly. Chris didn't think we should involve the police just yet. He offered instead to go with me, and I readily accepted. He reasoned that calmly talking to her, trying to coax her into going willingly, was the best recourse. I agreed to do it his way. At least I wouldn't be going into that house alone. We drove over this morning, just after breakfast. There was no way I was going at night. When we pulled into the driveway, my stomach began doing somersaults. Her car wasn't there, but I still didn't let my guard down. The front door was ajar, and for a split second I thought we'd see her eyes staring through the gap. I was shaking and starting to sweat. Chris, however, was fine. He waited for me to open the door, his hands in his pockets like he was going on a fucking stroll through the park. I envied his ignorance. I pushed the door open and was immediately hit with the stench of rot. Chris smelled it too, and he walked in the house behind me with his nose scrunched up. "What do you guys use to clean the floors around here, shit?" Chris mumbled. "Shut up," I said, my eyes darting around for any signs of Lynn. The house was deadly quiet and dark despite being 10 in the morning. All the curtains were closed up tight, refusing to allow any sunlight inside. If I hadn't left it just 2 days prior, I'd have thought the house to be abandoned. We moved through each room, carefully checking any place that she might hide, occasionally calling her name. "Why the fuck are you looking under the couch?" Chris asked eventually. "Aren't we looking for your wife?" He was looking at me like I was a moron. "Let's just go upstairs," I whispered. He shook his head but followed me up the stairs to check the bathroom and spare bedroom. On the way up, my shoes crunched over pieces of glass that looked to be littered over a few of the steps. I noticed that one of Lynn and my wedding portraits that hung on the wall along the staircase had been smashed. The frame hung crookedly, all the glass removed. I stared at the picture, a lump forming in my throat. We had taken the photo just after leaving the church, after saying our vows. She looked so beautiful in her white gown. I looked at Lynn's beautiful face. I never dreamed her face would ever be a source of terror for me. We climbed the rest of the steps and checked the spare bedroom, but it looked completely untouched. I was hesitant to go into the bathroom, my fear from that night coming back to me all at once. Chris noticed and offered to go in by himself, but I couldn't let him do that. So we walked in together, checking the closet and the shower. The bathroom looked as if it hadn't been touched since the night I left. "I don't think she's here, Ben. Why don't you pack some clothes and we'll try coming back tomorrow or something?" Chris said. I nodded and went into our bedroom and shoved some clothes into a duffel bag. When I checked inside our closet, I came across the source of the smell and gagged. Chris took one look and lost all color in his face. He had to go stand by the stairs to get away from the sight and smell. I gazed down in shock at what lay inside my bedroom closet. Soaking into the rug were at least a dozen eyeballs, all carefully laid out in pairs. Some were as large as a quarter, while others were as tiny as a marble. I stared down at the eyes she'd collected from small animals, and I wondered how she'd gotten them, and shuddered at the thought. "Man, I thought I had it bad with Becca's shoe addiction. But fuck me. Your wife's in here collecting eyeballs," Chris said, gagging. "Ben, I think we should go," he called from the hall. "I'm getting nauseous." "All right." I grabbed my duffel and shut the closet door on my new nightmare. I stepped out into the hall and took a deep breath of air. I could taste the rot on my tongue and I couldn't help but gag. "Who the fuck lines up eyeballs in their closet like that?" Chris mumbled. "I tried to tell you she needed help," I said. "She doesn't need help, Ben. She needs a fucking exorcist," he said. "You coming or what? I can't stand the smell any—" His words died in his throat, and his eyes grew wide with fear. I didn't ask him why. I could feel it. Someone was watching me, and I didn't think it was the eyes in the closet. I turned around, my eyes slowly scanning the bedroom. "Christ," I whispered, as I finally saw what we'd missed. Under the bed, curled on her side, watching us with the excitement of a kid on Christmas morning, was my wife. She held her hands together just under her chin, and they were shaking eagerly. Now that she knew she'd been found, I could hear the quiet noises she was making, a sort of hiccuping sound in her throat, as if the excitement was just too much for her. It was unnerving, to say the least. Wide eyes, and that same huge smile. Everything in me told me to run, but I forced it away. This was my wife. No matter how twisted, she was still the woman I married. I had to help her. "Lynn," I said softly. She didn't respond, but her head bobbed back and forth in two quick little movements as if she were nodding. "Baby, I just want to help, okay? Can you let me do that?" I asked. I had taken a single step forward, approaching her like some kind of dangerous animal. "I love you, Lynn," I said softly, taking another step closer. She let a tiny moan escape her wide-open mouth, and I had to resist the urge to run. Her shoulders were starting to quiver, and her eyes grew as large as saucers. I crouched down so I could see her better, and immediately saw the blood. Her hands were covered in it. They trembled more the closer I got, as if she was barely able to contain herself. "Lynn, are you hurt? You're bleeding," I said. She bobbed her head again, her bloody fingers moving up and down as if playing an invisible piano. They occasionally grazed her chin, leaving smears of blood on her skin. I wanted to recoil in disgust. The smell that was coming off of her was revolting. I could feel the vomit trying to climb up my throat. Her lips were dry and stretched thin, blood seeping between the cracks. I knew she wouldn't come out on her own, but I didn't want to leave her in the state she was in. I scooted closer and reached out to her. The excited hiccuping sounds got louder and her hands shook, fingers flexing. It was then that I could see the blood oozing from in between her fingers. "Oh my God, Lynn, you're bleeding," I said. Instinctively, I reached out to take her hand, but before I could even touch her, her hand sprang out towards me. A sharp pain shot through my arm, and I fell back on my ass. My arm burned, and I could see the blood dripping down onto the carpet. I looked back at her in shock and saw her grinning madly, her fingers clutching a large shard of glass. "You all right in there?" Chris asked from behind me. I turned my head slightly and nodded to him, cradling my arm to my chest. When I turned back to face Lynn, I saw that her focus had shifted. She wasn't looking at me anymore, and she wasn't smiling anymore either. She was staring past me, her eyes glaring at Chris the way a hungry lion might stare at an antelope. Her mouth was still hanging open, but it was twisted into a snarl. I got to my feet and began walking backwards down the hall, afraid to take my eyes off her. "Are you bleeding?" Chris asked. The moment the words left his mouth, Lynn started fast, scooting out from under the bed, the glass shard still in her fist. "Chris, run! Go!" I yelled. He must have been too afraid to move, because a second later I felt my back bump into him. He was still standing at the top of the stairs, staring at the horror that was my wife. Lynn had crawled completely out from under the bed and stood in the bedroom doorway, her face twisted in rage. Her whole body was visibly tense. Blood ran down her fingers and onto the floor. "Jesus, Lynn," Chris said. You, playing hide and seek?" I reached back and pushed him towards the steps. "Move your ass, Chris," I said as quietly but firmly as I could. Lynn bobbed her head in fast, sharp motions and began to grin, stretching her mouth open wider and wider so that her chin seemed to touch her chest. I heard Chris mutter a prayer, and then he was running down the stairs. I stood at the top of the steps, stuck between the love for a woman who clearly needed serious help and self-preservation. "I only want to help," I said, choking back tears. Her eyes focused on me once again as she slowly lifted the glass, holding it out in front of her. And then she started sprinting towards me, grinning with utter excitement. Thankfully, my body took over, and I flew down the stairs, skipping 2 or 3 at a time. I made it to the front door before I felt her leap onto my back, wrapping her arms around my neck, her open mouth next to my ear so that I could hear those terrible hiccuping sounds up close. I shook her off me, knocking her to the floor. I felt a searing pain in my back as she went, but I tore open the front door and bolted to my car. Chris was standing in the front yard talking on the phone with the police. I didn't say a word, I just ran to my car and jumped in. Chris took the hint and followed me, still on the line with 911. I watched the rearview mirror, sure I'd see her there, running after us. But I never did. I went straight to the ER and got 11 stitches in my arm and 3 on my back. The police asked a lot of questions and went back to the house to do a search, but of course Lynn wasn't there. They advised me to stay with a friend or relative for a while and to file a restraining order as soon as I could, but none of those things would matter. Somehow I just knew. I dropped Chris off at home and went to a motel an hour away. I wanted to put as much distance between me and Lynn as I could. This is where I've been for the last 4 hours. I thought maybe the police would find her. Maybe they'd get her the help she desperately needs. But now, I don't think so. Because 40 minutes ago I got a text from an unknown number. Just 3 words, "I found you," and a picture attached. The picture was dark and grainy, but I instantly knew what it was. There was no mistaking my wife's eye. I started typing this out immediately after. I don't know what to do. I'm alone and scared, and I can't help but feel that I'm being watched. The previous tenant left a survival guide. Can you ever really know someone? I woke up the morning after my discovery of the kittens with them crawling all over me. I guessed that they were a little younger than 8 weeks old. They were strong and independent, pouncing on my chest with their sizzling paws to wake me up. They were well looked after. It made it harder to believe that their mother had just abandoned them. I thought I knew the block. My entrance had been dramatic enough to introduce me to what I thought were the majority of strange goings-on in the place. I walked the halls with a naive confidence that the building wouldn't be able to surprise me anymore. I thought I was prepared for anything. The events of the night before had squashed that confidence. I knew that the building had sealed off floor 9 after the fire, but I never considered the possibility of other hidden floors or flats. Every other floor from the ground up was accounted for, and there were no stairs leading downwards. I hadn't set foot inside the lift since Derek had taken me in there, and I couldn't remember an LG or -1 button from when he had. I had never known the cats to reproduce either. By rights, they're all strays, and if they had been working, the place would be overrun with kittens. The cute little bundles on my sofa shouldn't have existed. Jamie was growling still, making low and disturbing noises. Luckily, the screaming had stopped. I nervously unlocked the wardrobe and placed a bowl of cat food in there as quickly as I could before locking it again. The wounds in my chest throbbed as I looked at him and let go of the bowl. Jamie had scratched and bitten a handful of times, but usually by mistake, and he had never hurt me badly. It's only made doing something about him much harder. His attack the day before had been different though, intentional, and as I dropped his food in that morning, he nipped hard at my finger, drawing blood. I sighed with relief as I secured the padlock and shuddered as I listened to him slurp and crunch on his food. I noticed the bloodstains from his attack spattered up the wardrobe door and shoved the spare chair back over the gap to make sure the door was shut and keep the kittens safe. Walking back to the kitchen to make tea, I noticed the vine in the cup of water on my fold-out table. It had grown, way more than any plant should in a matter of hours. It had stretched out of the cup and down the table, producing large, healthy-looking leaves. I had no idea what it meant, if it meant anything at all. If it had come from a room with no sunlight, then, like the kittens, it shouldn't have existed. Ms. Esther Beckman's words echoed in my mind. If you look hard enough, you will find a way. Maybe the friend I had been supposed to help was the kitten's mother. What if she was stuck in the basement and I just needed to find a way in? I didn't have time to think too deeply about it. Terry had run my errands the day before, but I couldn't expect her to do it daily. Percy and Sylvia wouldn't need anything until the weekend now, but Mr. Prentice would struggle without my help. I had to carry on. So I got dressed, placed a bowl of water down for the kittens, promised them I'd bring back proper food, and made my way down the hall to flat 48. I knocked and stood back to give him time to answer. "Morning, Mr. Prentice." I tried my best to smile and be chirpy, putting the whirlwind of thoughts I had to the back of my mind. "Morning, Cat. I'm sorry to hear about Essie. Terry told me yesterday. She was one of the longest-serving residents here, you know, along with myself and Molly. A terrible loss." He hung his head as he gripped his walking stick. "She was a great person. I'm sorry I didn't get to know her for longer," I answered, feeling the fake smile I'd plastered across my face collapse. "She helped me out of a few scrapes. Essie had an extraordinary gift. Never once gave bad advice that I know of. She was a great drinking buddy, too, back in the day." Mr. Prentice chuckled at his memories, but looked truly saddened by the situation. It was the most I'd ever heard him speak in one go, and his mention of how long they'd lived here made me think. "Mr. Prentice, do you know if this place has a basement?" I asked. He pondered my question for a while. "Well, I've never seen one, but that's not to say it doesn't exist." He smiled a little. I could see he had noticed the despair in my eyes, and his smile was comforting. I struggled to find the words to respond, so he changed the subject. "Could you drop some money to my friend at the pub today, please? And grab me a newspaper and a bottle of whiskey if you don't mind." He threw 2 envelopes of cash onto the corridor floor between us, and I nodded, told him I'd be back soon, and set off. As I exited the main doors, I turned to look at the garden and considered searching for the grate again, then and there, but decided I would wait. It was torturous. Instead, I thought of Essie as I made my way through the park, taking in the breeze and the birdsong. The Pickled Gnome, Mr. Prentice's drinking spot, looked sad and empty, with a sign in the window stating closed due to the virus. I popped the envelope labeled Carmilla through a letterbox in the large red door and began to walk away, noticing through the window a lone woman sat at the bar in a dressing gown, nursing a cup of tea. As I carried on towards the shop, I heard a voice behind me. "Hey!" I turned to see the woman standing at the door of the pub, waving her arms. A large, fluffy cat rubbed himself up against her feet. I turned and waved back. "Please tell him thanks. I really appreciate it. "Drinks on me when this is over. You should come too," she shouted, beaming at me. "I'll tell him. Stay safe," I shouted back as she ushered the cat back in and closed the door again. Maybe I would have a drink with Mr. Prentice when this was all over. I imagined him with a shot of whiskey telling stories of the block and smiled. It was a nice thought. I ventured further than the usual shop, to one I knew would sell specialized kitten food. I grabbed the whiskey, paper, and a ready meal. Although he never asked, Mr. Prentice never turned down food, and I hated to think of him hungry. When I reached the block again, I struggled to pass the garden a second time, but made my way up the stairs and towards the flat, passing the man on floor 5. "Hi, Jeremiah." I waved at him. No response. Better take that one off the list. I passed the woman from the gnome's message and the items onto Mr. Prentice and rushed home to feed the kittens. As I placed the 3 tiny bowls I'd purchased down, I decided I should name them. I couldn't keep calling them kittens. They became Wrinkles, Tetley, and Mr. Meow, and they were about the only reason I could think of to smile. As they happily lapped up their food, I could hear Jamie growling in the background, scratching at the door. He must have smelled the kitten meat. I waited until they'd finished every last bite and washed up the bowls immediately to reduce any risk of him trying to pound his way out of the cupboard. Then I left the flat to finally search for the basement. I tried the bottom of the stairs, searched the entire lower floor for a new stairwell or a door, but there was nothing. I tried the garden too. The same spot from the night before in the bushes was just plain concrete, no grate to be seen, and no vine growing upwards to match the monster in my kitchen. There was no grate the entire perimeter of the building. My heart sunk with a difficult realization. There was only one place that I hadn't looked. Standing in front of the lift was daunting. I imagined Essie and how it was the last thing she had looked at. I wondered if I would ever know her motives. I imagined Jamie, before any of this, walking in obliviously on his way to another shift at work, smiling stupidly at the novelty of us having our own home. My body shook and my legs became weak, but I managed to force them forward and step inside. Staring at the buttons inside the lift took me back to standing with Derek. How safe I had felt compared to now. Having him around felt like having my own private guardian angel, guiding me every step of the way. His absence left a painful void. It made that tiny metal box feel enormous. I once again searched for button 9 but couldn't find it, despite nothing looking out of place. It was oddly comforting. Expected. Unlike the past few days had been. The lowest floor I could find was G, the one I was currently standing on, but I knew the lift was able to play tricks. I could never be truly sure. Not without Derek. I stared at it for what must have been at least 5 minutes, looking as hard as I could just like Essie had advised, but it turned up nothing. I was grateful to get out of the lift, but frustrated that it hadn't made anything clearer. I stared at it for a while. Its rickety construction and dilapidated feel made my heart pound. I couldn't look at it without imagining blood and bones lining the floor. "Fuck you, Essie." I cursed underneath my breath as I walked up the stairs towards my flat, defeated. "Why did you have to go?" Her cryptic intuition had done nothing but raise questions, and she wasn't there to answer any of them. My life was starting to feel like some sort of cruel joke. The stairwell, devoid of average human life, was eerie and just added to my sense of solitude. I'd conquered a huge trauma to even stand in that lift, yet all my searching efforts had taught me was that the man on floor 5 wasn't called Eric or Mikey. I reached the flat and paced around it for a while, being careful not to step on Wrinkles, the largest of my 3 adoptees, who seemed to really enjoy playing around my feet. Mr. Prentice was right. Just because I hadn't been somewhere and couldn't see it, didn't mean that it didn't exist. I'd taken the building for granted and gotten too comfortable. Derek had once described the place as a living organism, and now I truly felt that it was taunting me and mocking my ill-placed confidence. I had to admit to myself that really, in all honesty, I knew nothing about it. Jamie's growls had become like a background symphony to my life. I'm ashamed to say I was able to almost entirely block them out. I couldn't ignore the vine, though. It had wrapped itself around the table leg, and stretched most of the kitchen floor, growing towards the balcony and desperately stretching for the light. I wasn't sure what to do with it. If I returned it to the garden, I might never see the grate again. The vine was the only proof to myself I had that it had been there in the first place. I tried to trim part off to take to the garden and compare with the other plants there, knowing that it would be an entirely futile endeavor, but as I clamped down with scissors, they snapped in my hand. The vine was rock solid. It was much tougher than it had been when I'd pulled my foot free. Perhaps the sunlight had done something to it. I tried my best to bunch it into one corner, but soon gave up, slightly terrified that it might suffocate me in my sleep. Tetley was asleep on the sofa while the other two played gently with each other. I sat down and tickled them a little, feeling my fingers start to go numb from the heat. I tried to think of other solutions to my problems than continually searching a concrete wall. I knew it wasn't going to turn up a basement, or tell me why Essie walked into the lift, or help me kill or cure Jamie. Unfortunately, I'm from a generation that's solution to every issue is Google, so that's all I could come up with, and I loaded up my laptop. I tried to search for original plans of the block to see if there was some kind of floor plan or architect drawings that could confirm the presence of a basement, but it turned out the place is too old for those to be online. The block was built in 1951, at the very start of the new high-rise trend. There was limited information on the place other than a few archived articles from around the time it was built and opened. I cursed the libraries having to be shut in this pandemic. According to the articles, it was a turbulent project from start to finish and was overseen by an architect and property development mogul who designed and paid for the building himself. There were reports that he was notoriously difficult to work with and that 3 construction firms pulled out of the project. The next headline I came across intrigued me. Cursed project finally completed, owner found hanged in unoccupied high-rise flats. There was little information on the suicide other than that it happened. If the building had been how it is today, I can imagine that being alone in the place with no information, or even confirmation that what you were seeing was real, could drive anyone mad. None of the articles even had the name of the architect, leaving me at a dead end. It took a few searches and more obscure archived city history blogs than I knew existed before I found anything else that piqued my interest. Heir to tragic high-rise architect's fortune suspected of killing his own son. The article was too blurred to read. It was a poorly taken photograph of a newspaper from the late 50s. This took away my chance, yet again, to find a name for the architect or even the son. I thought about what bad luck the family had suffered. To be able to design and build something like that in those days meant you must have incredible wealth. But no amount of money could save them from tragedy, especially not somewhere like here. I tried to adapt my search, instead entering a rabbit hole of murders in the late 50s. As I scanned the page, I damned human nature. There were so many acts of evil detailed in the blogs. I even learned about Ruth Ellis, the last woman to be executed in the UK in 1955. Eventually, I found an entry that matched up. His name was Albert Miles, and he was the eldest of 2 brothers. When his revered architect father died, he took over management of the tower block that him and his brother had become the very first occupants of. He was hugely successful and pegged to become one of the biggest names in property development in the UK. The once empty block was mostly full by the time the killing happened. Police were called by a resident living directly below Albert Miles, who complained that blood was dripping onto their balcony from above. When police arrived, Albert was nowhere to be found, but the body of his 19-year-old son was starting to decompose in the sun on his balcony. He had been stabbed multiple times. Albert was never found or convicted, and the case remained unsolved, however. Most were in agreement that he did it. A bloodied kitchen knife belonging to Albert dropped just inside the doors to the balcony all but confirmed it. It was interesting, but I wasn't sure it was helpful. I started to worry that my research had gone in completely the wrong direction. I wasn't sure how Albert Miles or the death of his son could help me, and I was about ready to shut my laptop and give up. Then I felt something slither across my shoulder from behind. The vine had grown exponentially, weaving a route from the kitchen to the sofa. I started to panic as it touched my skin, but it didn't wrap itself around me or try to cause any harm, just gently glided across my shoulder and to the computer. It stroked the name of the blog on the header of the page a few times before falling to the ground, only a slight overhang left on the sofa. It didn't want me to stop. There was no more information on Google, so I sent a direct email to the blog owner, asking for anything on the Albert Miles killing that they had, or details of anyone they could direct me to. I claimed it was for a university project. I stopped and watched the TV for a while, the kittens all cuddled on my lap. I was grateful for my blanket, creating just enough barrier to stop me melting. Raspy, wheezing snores came from the bedroom. I decided to spend another night on the sofa. It felt much safer. I started to drift off a little and went to shut the laptop, but a loud ping from my email box woke me. Chills ran up my spine a little as I opened the message. "Hey, Kat. Thanks for your email. Unfortunately, that particular case is very little known and doesn't have a lot of information out there at all. As you can appreciate, cold cases can be difficult to catalog, but I aim to provide the most comprehensive online case files possible. The only thing I have on this case that isn't on the blog is a photograph of Albert Miles and his unnamed brother outside the high-rise flats. I was new to blogging at the time I wrote that entry and wasn't sure how to insert images. Your message has reminded me to go back and include this one. I've attached here in case it's of any use to you. I would recommend checking out similar case files that may fit your project. Please don't hesitate to get in touch if you have any queries. Thank you for reading." Simon, Murders in the Capital. I felt the frustration bubbling up. No further information, another dead end. I opened up the attachment to take a look at the mysterious Albert Miles. I was resigned that it would be of no use at all. Then the picture loaded. Two men, handsome, and maybe in their mid-late 30s, standing outside the main doors of the largely unchanged block. They were similar looking, with a strong family resemblance but very different demeanors. One was dressed in a sharp-looking suit and stood with a controlled posture. He had a serious facial expression and pointy features. The other was slumped against the wall, a smile on his face and familiar, kind-looking eyes. This man wore a casual outfit that you might expect to see on a laborer of that era. Atop his head was the clue that I had been looking for in the form of a flat cap. Standing there next to Albert Miles was my lost friend Derek. The previous tenant left a survival guide. Never take the sunlight for granted. Derek and I stared at Ellie in silence. It wasn't a stare of horror, more of sheer disbelief. I couldn't be more grateful that she had saved our lives. What remained of Albert on the floor wasn't a source of alarm. Despite his extended life, she had ripped him into enough pieces that if he had survived, he couldn't speak and must have been in unbelievable pain. Just like the residents he tortured for years. It would have been a cruel irony, and I almost half hoped he hadn't truly died, as sick as that may sound. "Are you okay?" I asked Ellie. She had shrunken and morphed back into a smaller demonic child, something that I felt a need to protect, despite the fact she didn't need anyone to do so. "I'm fine," she answered, head still hung as if she were ashamed. There was a pause for a moment. "Thank you, sweetheart. We'd all be dead without you." Derek chipped in, his normal calm and positive tone restored. Ellie lifted her head and smiled as he recognized her for the hero she was. It wasn't that I didn't feel the same, it's just that the shock was overwhelming. "We need to help another friend now, honey. Do you want to grab Kat and come with me?" Ellie wrapped her clawed hand in mine as I clutched Derek's blood-soaked tweed cap with the other. She looked at me with love, just like she had at the beginning of this nightmare. The cold atmosphere of the floors below that we stood in had been reduced to a pile on the ground, just like Albert. We walked towards flat -51. Every step felt wobbly, like those few steps after a really spinny ride at the fair. I struggled to put one foot in front of the other. Derek dropped to where Essie lay squirming and put a gentle hand over her chest, carefully avoiding the splintered rib bones that stuck out. "I'm so sorry," he said to her as he shut his eyes, leant down and kissed her bloodied forehead. The shards of bone that decorated her entire body started to move and rearrange. She squealed in pain as her skin started to cauterize over the newly repositioned bone and innards. Her twisted limbs started to resemble something human again. I felt tears rolling down my face. Once she was as close to her usual herself as she was going to get, Derek took a step back as she opened her eyes, that had returned to the hollowed sockets, and looked directly at me. Essie was blind. She had always been blind, but she knew that I was there. We held her gently as the three of us helped her to her sofa, an exact replica of the one upstairs, placing each bruised limb into position as carefully as we could. The bruises shone purple and green underneath the harsh artificial lighting, reminding me that we weren't really home. "Cat," she struggled to speak. Her jaw hadn't quite relocated the whole way. I knew what she wanted, though. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a slightly bloody cigarette. Essie reached out with broken fingers and held it to her lips as best she could as I put down the flat cap and lit it for her. "Come on, sweetheart, we're going to stand in the other room," Derek said to Ellie as he ushered her into the hallway and away from the smoke, leaving me alone with Ms. Beckman. "I'm sorry, Essie," I started. She tried to reply, but she could barely make a sound. "You were right, though. He did need help. Now no one in the block is going to go through what you have anymore. I'm sorry I couldn't save you." Essie puffed on the cigarette with great difficulty. She could barely close her lips around it, but she persisted, with a glint in her eye that indicated this was the first pleasure she'd enjoyed in quite some time. She grunted a strained no at me. "Ellie did it. I can finally take her home now. I just wish that we could take you and Derek with us." I lit my own cigarette and took a long draw from it. "You can, no, not me. Go home, go home," she managed, every word leaving a trail of pain in her face. I cringed. Despite her better appearance, she wasn't fixed. She was in as much pain as she had been before. I smiled at her, just to try and make her feel a little normal. "Speaking in fucking riddles again, Essie?" I responded, trying to muster a laugh through the tears that continued to fill my eyes. She looked directly at me again, and I knew that she had been serious. We finished our smoke in silence as I wept and she wheezed. "Derek!" I shouted after a few more minutes with her, encouraging him back into the flat. Him and Ellie appeared within seconds. He took one look at me, nodded with tears in his eyes too, and he knew what to do. I got up from the sofa and pulled Ellie in for a hug, careful to avoid her horns, making sure that she faced me. Then I watched over her shoulder as he delicately closed Essie's eyelids, and the wheezing stopped. I held in a sob and clutched my young friend as tightly as I could. Derek walked towards us and put his arms around the both of us for a moment in silent mourning before stepping back. Ellie looked up at me, a knowing in her voids, and she spoke. "I want to go home now, Cat." Her words broke what was left of my resolve. The sobbing began and Derek put his hand on my shoulder. He started to walk us out of the hallway, and as we reached the mess on the floor that had once been Albert, outside the door of flat -42, I came to a sudden stop. "No further. We need to go in there," I said, directing them into the open door of my anti-flat. Derek tried to speak and protest, but I stopped him the moment he opened his mouth. "Please, just trust me." I wasn't angry or frantic like before, and I think that he knew I wasn't trying to lead us into more trouble. I recognized that I'd probably done enough of that to last a lifetime. Essie hadn't led me astray before. Her advice had been sound. I'd taken a few detours, but I got to the right place eventually. If I were to respect her death, then I had to follow the last bit of advice she gave out. The flat was familiar. My sofa, fold-out table, and kitchen were all there, identical to the ones I'd spent so much time at. The flat was windowless, the sole indication in my confusion that I wasn't truly home. I pulled back the curtains of the balcony doors to reveal thick concrete behind them. It was sad, really, but I almost longed to see the window cleaner tapping on the glass and begging to be let in. I would trade his persistent harassment for my current predicament in a heartbeat. I felt my face sink. Whatever Essie had wanted me to see here wasn't as clear as I'd hoped. I should have anticipated that it wouldn't be easy. Derek and Ellie stood in silence as I inspected every inch of the place, even down to an equally smashed copy of the prison I had kept Jamie in. Frustrated, I eventually looped back into the living room, prepared to walk out the front door and follow Derek to the basement entrance, where he would leave us again. The prospect of going through all that for him to remain trapped in these layers was more disheartening than anything I'd felt before. Then I saw the light. It wasn't a eureka moment, or some sort of religious epiphany. It was an actual physical light. It wasn't artificial like the one that had plagued our stay in the Undertower. It was real, and it was coming from the sun. How? Derek uttered in wonder as his eyes fixed on the grate that had appeared at the top of the concrete, behind the sliding balcony doors. The sun flooding in lit up his whole face and electrified his kind eyes. The opening looked just the same as it had the night I found the kittens, but from the other side, its appearance was all the more poignant. Who would have thought that metal bars could signify such freedom? When it first appeared, I had never imagined that something other than a basement could exist beneath the block. Thank you, Essie. I looked up at the ceiling and imagined her smile as it had been before Albert had got to her. She knew she couldn't be saved, but she made sure Derek didn't have to stay. And I knew that in her death she wouldn't have to suffer again. The grate was just large enough for a person to fit through with enough of a squeeze, and I could almost make out the shrubbery me and the twins had planted. See? You're coming too! I grinned at Derek with the first bit of true joy I'd felt in quite some time. He didn't protest this time, or argue at all. He smiled back and just said two simple words. Thank you. I pulled open the sliding door and Ellie, who had been stood to the side, climbed the curtain with her claws as quickly as possible. I was amazed and grateful that she didn't pull them down. I watched in awe as she wrenched the bars away from the concrete and uninterrupted sunlight poured into the lower flat. The sunlight bathed us all, and Ellie dropped to the ground the same time as her claws and horns began to retract. I couldn't pinpoint the exact moment the voids disappeared, but they did. There she was, mess of blonde hair on her head and brown puppy dog eyes looking at us as she hit the ground with a thud. A little girl you wouldn't suspect more than a tantrum of replaced the ferocious beast that had protected me through this hellish landscape. The front door that led to the hallway where Albert's remains laid had suddenly been replaced by a thick blank wall, just as the lift that brought us here had been. All that remained was the flat, the three of us, and the open grate. I pulled one of the chairs from the fold-out table below it and turned to Derek. You first, so you can pull us out. He was busy staring at the newly transformed girl. There was a guilt in his eyes, and he looked at Ellie more strangely than he had when she was demonic. Regardless, the connection was still there. I handed him the flat cap, still soaked in blood, and he placed it onto his head with a genuine smile. He looked himself again with it in place as he took a step onto the chair. Before climbing out, he turned to us and winked. He wriggled through the grate with some difficulty and reached his hands back through. I watched Ellie's tiny clawless hand clutch his fingerless one as he hoisted her through the gap. Left alone in the flat, I took another look at my surroundings and took a moment to consider all the pain beneath the block. I imagined a life where Ellie hadn't come with me, and I was trapped for good or dead at the hands of the rat creatures. As I burst through the small gap, pulled by both Derek and Ellie, the bright sun and sensation of the shrubs in my hair as I crawled through them felt like a rebirth. The garden was stunning. Dewdrops littered the green foliage and the rising orange sun lit them up like fireflies. I had never been more appreciative of it. Looking back at the outer edge of the building, the grate was gone, along with any indication that it had been there at all. I wondered why it had appeared in my flat down there, why I had been the person to find it both times, and I remembered what Albert had said about the building altering those who stay. I pondered he was right, and if it was possible that it had altered me already. As we sat in the fresh morning air, I knew that none of it really mattered. Standing outside of a grim city tower block was cathartic. Gray concrete had never looked so inviting. We were home. The scenes of carnage and destruction that I had imagined would greet us when we entered the building were nowhere to be seen. Albert had certainly cleaned up. There was no kitten leg or creatures, or even evidence of a kerfuffle. It made me all the more nervous. I had no idea who had been hurt. The slow trudge to Ellie's floor was painful. My limbs all ached and the ringing in my ears continued. Still, I was just so glad to be getting her home. I couldn't wait to see Terry's face when we returned her daughter safely. Ellie may have looked a mess, but she was alive and well, which was the best I could ask for given the circumstances. I wish I could say that Terry greeted us with joy. I really do wish I could. Instead, her face was sullen, and the dark circles that sat like tattoos looked deeper than before. The skin around her eyes was puffed up and swollen with tears. When she spotted Ellie, she fell to her knees with relief. I hoped her face would brighten, but it didn't. "Where is he?" she sobbed, grabbing hold of Ellie and clutching her as tightly as she could. "Where's my son?" My heart dropped to my stomach. I'd made a sea of bad decisions in my time, but this, if this was what Albert had meant, was the worst consequence I could have imagined. I tried to find words, but I couldn't. I'd never seen a person look quite so broken. The pain in the screams of the mangled people wasn't a patch on Terry's sobbing. "Is that his blood?" she asked, gesturing to our clothes and hair while struggling to speak. I had been complacent. If the creatures had overpowered Eddie, if they had won, then maybe there wasn't enough of him left for Albert to see that he was like his sister. I shouldn't have written off the possibility like I had. Derek stepped forwards and put his hands on Terry's shoulders. She winced, and I remembered the lockdown situation, the only grounding in reality that I'd felt since returning to the upper layers of the block. She looked him in the eyes. "I don't know if you remember me, Terry. You were very small the last time we met, but I remember your parents." His kindly eyes had locked with hers as she melted and collapsed into him, wailing and gasping for air. Together we walked her to the sofa, not unlike how we had Essie not long before. I'd never known Terry's flat to be so quiet. Eddie was always playing, he was always so loud, and he always came home. Ellie was the absconder. It's why I'd found it easy to convince myself that Eddie was playing in his room, disrupting Terry's sleep like normal as we navigated the layers below. In all honesty, I think I was just trying to convince myself that I couldn't possibly be responsible for the death of a child. Logically, I always knew that with his sister gone for that long, he'd go looking. I really hoped we would get home in time, that he could hold his own. I don't know. Anything but this. I had buried my worries. Terry couldn't breathe properly through thick, heavy sobs. The noise muffled my already fucked up ears. Derek sat with his arms around her while Ellie nuzzled into his other side, and I sat opposite, blood-soaked, devastated, and alone. Knock, knock, knock. The tapping on the door brought all conversation, sobbing and brooding, to a stop. Terry sprinted to the door, hope in her eyes, and as it opened, she wailed in joy. "Get off me, Mum! Where's Ellie?" The familiar voice of the young boy jolted me back into the room, and I turned to see Eddie, accompanied by none other than Mr. Prentice. Eddie spotted his sister on the sofa and ran towards the three of us. "Whoa, where did all the blood come from? Cool!" he shouted. There were a few cuts and bruises covering his limbs, but he seemed mostly unharmed. His excitement was enough to tell me that he was okay. Derek stared at him in disbelief, not unlike how he had Ellie upon their first meeting. I turned and walked towards the door, to where Terry and Mr. Prentice were speaking. Mr. Prentice wobbled slightly as he kept himself propped up with his cane. "What happened?" I asked. "I'm not sure. I heard a lot of banging and decided I should go and check what was going on. I found him at the bottom by that ghastly lift. I didn't recognize the man in the suit. I couldn't get close enough, but I don't understand how anyone could stand over an injured child and not help. He ran into the lift when I got closer, and you know how I like to avoid that place. I'm not sure why folk run from me sometimes, but it was probably for the best. I'm not sure what I'd have done." I imagined Mr. Prentice in his animal form running towards Albert. Imagining that the landlord had run scared from the beast warmed my heart. "Anyway, I'm rather tired, so if you don't..." Mr. P stopped as he caught a glimpse of the inside of the flat behind us. His eyes widened. "Is that Derek?" Derek came up behind us and reached out a bloodied hand to shake Mr. Prentice's. The elderly man looked unsteady on his cane, as if he had seen a ghost. "It's been years," he stuttered, beaming, firmly gripping Derek's intact hand. "We shall have to have a drink together, my friend." "We will," Derek smiled. "I'm back now. There'll be plenty of time to catch up." Terry clutched the twins tightly as the two men reveled in their meeting. I couldn't help but smile quietly to myself and think of Essie. The kids were safe, Derek was back, and Albert couldn't continue to terrorize the block. And yet again, Mr. Prentice had proved himself the real MVP. We left Terry and the kids to have some family time. Ellie hugged Derek so tightly as we left, I thought she might crush him. We walked back to the 7th floor where mine and Mr. P's flats were. It should have been a victory walk, but I couldn't shake the feeling that everything wasn't entirely over. My feeling was confirmed once the door to flat 48 closed behind Mr. Prentice and Derek looked at me gravely. There's a few more things you need to know, Kat. Can you get cleaned up and meet me in the garden?" Things have deteriorated here to a degree that I didn't foresee. I didn't know how much writing about the things that are happening out here would affect every single part of my life, and maybe that was stupid of me. Maybe I should have considered it more seriously, but honestly I just thought I was writing about things that a few people would want to hear. I didn't think it would get this much attention. People ask me about the stairs now. It doesn't happen every day, but when it does happen, I never really know what to say. My bosses know someone is talking about them, and I'm sure that if they know, the higher-ups know. And I can tell you that they aren't happy about it. I've been formally told that I am not to speak a word about them to anyone anymore, which is part of the reason this has to be my final update. I can't risk my job for this. As much as it's been wonderful to get a lot of these things off my mind, I still do love my work, and I need to be out here. If anything, my being aware of what's really going on is enough reason to stick it out. I may not be able to tell people that they're out there, but if I see them, I can direct traffic away to somewhere safer. Because of the amount of attention the stories have gotten, I've heard a lot of stories being swapped back and forth. I've heard so many I can't even remember most of them. The ones I do remember are the ones that I wish I could forget. One story that's made the rounds here was about a young woman who disappeared upstate. Initially, everyone assumed she was a runaway. She didn't come from a great home life, and so it really wasn't any kind of surprise that she'd choose to cut and run. But people started coming forward saying that they'd seen her around the park shortly before she vanished, so some of the rangers in the area were sent out to make sure she hadn't hung herself or something on any of the back trails. It took them a while, but they did find her. Well, not all of her. Just half of her tongue and a quarter of the lower jaw. Very clean cuts, from what I heard. They've never found the rest of her. So many stories about children, so many of them going missing and turning up in caves, wedged in between impossibly tight spaces. So many of them found on mountain peaks or at the bottoms of sheer gullies. Missing shoes, missing socks, or found with both in perfect condition despite them being miles and miles away from where they vanished. So many stories of black-eyed people wandering around the woods and calling out in the night, mimicking the sound of running water or a bobcat screaming. One man in particular goes to every news station he thinks will listen to him and tells the same story. He was deer hunting, had camped out in a very remote area, and woke up because something was scraping against his tent. He thought it was a raccoon or a fox until the thing pressed its face against the door of the tent, at which point he could very clearly make out a human nose and mouth. He kicked at it, but it leapt back and was gone by the time he opened the tent flap, gun at his side. He fired 2 warning shots, and when the sound had faded, he heard a snap behind him. A man was standing at the edge of the campsite. This man was not wearing any clothing, but he also didn't possess any kind of human flesh. As this hunter described it, the man was made of some kind of amalgamation of raw meat and hair, as if someone had scooped up roadkill and molded it into the vague shape of a man. The face was lumpy and only a rough approximation of a human face. The thing opened its lopsided mouth, and from it came the sound of the gun the hunter had fired. It did this twice before mimicking the sound of the tent zipper and fleeing into the night. A young couple, out for a hike in the rocky areas of my park, reported to me yesterday that they had seen something strange out on a peak I'm very familiar with. They were taking turns looking through a pair of binoculars when the man noticed a hiker climbing up a very steep part of the cliff face. He watched the man scale the slope, and it didn't occur to him until the incident was over that this person had no climbing gear. When the climber reached the top of the peak, which was about 5 miles away, they turned and faced the young man. He said whoever, or whatever this person was looking right at them. The climber waved in an exaggerated manner before snapping in half at the waist, sideways, and leaping off the peak. The young man didn't see where the climber landed. I sent them on their way with assurances that I'd check it out. I lied. I won't be turning in a report because there are 10 others exactly like it. The climber is well known in that area. I don't question it anymore. There are so many things I won't ever be able to understand about my job, and it would take me years to relate all of the things I've heard in the last few months. When I feel like my job isn't in jeopardy, I will come back. It may be in a different format, but I will come back. Thank you all for sticking by my side and enjoying the things I've talked about. If you go out into the woods, I encourage you to be safe. Bring water, food, survival equipment. Let people know where you're going and when you'll be back. Don't go on uncharted paths unless you know exactly what you're doing. And above all, don't touch them. Don't look at them. Don't go up them.
They should have never confiscated my son's Tamagotchi. Until 3 weeks ago, I was living what most would consider a simple and happy life. I'm a stay-at-home dad, probably on Reddit, more than I care to admit. I met my wife, Noriko, or Nori for short, in Osaka, Japan, 12 years ago, during a work trip for an advertising agency. Shortly after we started dating, Nori was offered a senior position at her company's newly opened NYC branch. At the time, I was living in Connecticut, but working remotely, so it was an easy decision to move in together in NYC. Plus, her mother has lived in Queens for the past 30 years, so it just made sense. 3 years later, we got married. The following spring, we had our son, Nicholas. Again, I'd like to emphasize that we've lived what I call a pretty normal life. We've had our ups and downs, but have never experienced anything quite like what I'm about to share. 3 weeks ago, Nicholas pulled this little gizmo out of his backpack. At first glance, it reminded me of a Tamagotchi, a little piece of plastic that easily could fit in your pocket, 3 or 4 little buttons on the bottom, and a cheap display up top. However, the design wasn't colorful, like I remember Tamagotchis being. It was obsidian black. From a distance, you could easily mistake it for some kind of medical device. And even stranger, I never could actually see any pet on the display. Either way, Nori and I hadn't any clue where he got it from. We presume a friend at school must have gifted it to him. He called it his tether pet, and was nothing short of obsessed with it. I mean, I could understand. I remember getting a Tamagotchi for Christmas when I was his age. It felt like you were responsible for some other life form. Your relationship with the toy often felt like a life or death situation. Nikki was certainly under a similar spell. So that same Sunday, we piled into Nori's Corolla and took the BQ Expressway to Mount Sinai Hospital in Queens to visit her mom, Aki, who's suffering from bone cancer. Nikki was in the back seat, attending to his tether pet. "How's your Tamagotchi, buddy?" "What?" "Your little pet there." Nikki is normally eager to yap Nori and I's ear off about whatever his fascination of the day is, but for whatever reason, his tone was flat and serious when discussing his tether pet. "Fine. Oh yay. Do you have a name for him?" "It's a girl." "Oh cool. What's her name?" "Baba." It came with the name. I didn't get to pick it. Nori tried to play along. "Baba, that's cute." "Not really. She's always hungry, and whenever she poops, I have to clean it up. I let out a laugh. Reminds me of somebody I used to know. No, Dad, it's a lot of responsibility. You wouldn't understand. Nori and I laughed. Oh, the simple joys of parenthood. We arrived at Aki's room, only to be held back by a couple of nurses. They asked us to wait while Grandma's bedpan was changed. It saddened me to think about how Aki had wilted over the past year. It didn't seem long ago she was in our living room, bouncing Nikki on her knee, singing that silly old horse racing anthem. Bum da da bum da da bum bum bum. Bum da da bum da da bum bum bum. Nikki loved that. He'd blow up in a fit of laughter every time. Now she couldn't even get out of her hospital bed. It crushed me, but I guess it had happened to me someday too. Before I could get too melancholy, a nurse opened the door with a smile. She's ready to see you now. We stepped inside, and there was Aki, still glowing, albeit dimly, with her usual tender smile. Nikki seemed to snap out of his fog, with her in sight, running to her bedside. Grandma! Aki tried to roll over and muster a hug for his reception, but it was clearly too much for her. Nori and I followed close behind. This had become a very difficult ritual for Nori to get used to. Aki told us about how her treatment had been going, how she was always in pain, but that there was still a chance she could get through it. I don't know why, but I never had any real faith that she would. I guess I've just seen this scenario play out one too many times. In my experience, at least, it never ended how we all prayed each night that it would. After some more light conversation and updates on work, school, etc., Nikki pulled out his tether pet. Oh, how are you liking the new toy Grandma gave you? Nori and I looked at each other flabbergasted. Aki gave it to him. She could barely get out of bed, let alone go buy Nikki a toy from the store. Aki, where did you get that toy from? I asked. Oh, I think one of the doctors gave it to me. Yes, it's something they're giving to a lot of the patients around here. It didn't make any sense, but before I could ask him more questions, a nurse came in and told us our time was up and that Aki needed to get some rest. Nori and I had a couple conversations, theorizing about why the hospital would have given her the toy. Maybe it was some charity connected to the hospital. Either way, we had more important things to worry about. So as the days went on, we let it go. Everything in our lives continued as normal until the day Nikki lost his tether pet. It was last week Friday. We were just sitting down for dinner when Nikki comes shuffling into the room, looking on the verge of tears. I can't find my tether pet. Nori was setting the table. She had really went all out for us that evening. Okay, well, after dinner, we can all take a look together to find it. Observing my son more closely, he wasn't just upset. He looked devastated. You don't understand, Mom. She could die if I don't. At this point, I decided it was time to do some fathering. I took a knee. Listen, Nicholas, I understand your toy is important to you, but it's just that right, a toy. So let's sit down and eat the dinner Mama made us, and we can take a look after, okay? I gave him that stern but tender look a father gives to ensure his way. Nikki nodded solemnly. I gave him a hug and a rub on the back. All throughout dinner, Nikki avoided our usual conversation starters. How was school? How was soccer practice? What do you want to do this weekend? Etc. It was clear his mind was racing. It really rubbed me the wrong way. I don't remember ever being this stressed about my Tamagotchi. Just then, Nori's phone rang. She moved to the edge of kitchen to take the call. I watched as her face slowly settled into a more serious expression as she listened to the other end. She responded with simple, short acknowledgments of what she was hearing as she walked over to the living room. She hung up and began to put on her coat. "Everything okay, honey?" I mouthed to her silently. "Aki." She nodded. "I think it should be fine, but if it becomes serious, I'll call you." "Sounds good." I looked to Nikki and provided a distraction. "Shall we look for Baba?" Nikki nodded his head frantically, clearly unwilling to wait an even second longer. We looked around the house for quite some time. He was certain he had come home with it, so I was pretty determined to help him find it. It really felt like looking for a needle in a haystack, though. It wasn't until we were just about to give up that we found it, fallen beneath the shoe rack near his backpack. I thought for sure we'd have some small celebration of our efforts, but Nicky didn't even smile. He just picked it up and began to shake his head. "Ah, man. What is it, buddy?" "Just a lot of buildup." "Oh, of what?" "Poop." I laughed. "It's not funny, Dad. She could have suffocated." "From the poop?" I laughed even harder. I've always had a stupid sense of humor. Nicky, presumably offended by my not taking this seriously, retreated up to his room. Alone, I decided this would be good a time as any to pop on an old samurai movie for my own selfish pleasures. Plus a 3-hour runtime would keep me up long enough in case Nori called. But about halfway into the movie, she came in the door, sopping, wet. I guess it had started raining. She explained that everything ended up okay, a false alarm. I cut the movie short, and we went to bed. As we laid together under the sheets, it was becoming clear she couldn't fall asleep. "What's wrong, babe?" "When I got to Sinai today, Mom had an accident." "Oh, like she shit herself." I wasn't sure how to respond, but luckily she continued. "What if we get so old or sick that some stranger has to literally wipe our ass?" I chuckled. "I mean, we probably will." She rolled over and looked at me with playful concern. "I don't want a stranger to wipe my ass." "So you're saying it has to be me?" She finally broke into a giggle. "Well, how about we just promise to take care of each other?" Then I kissed her on the cheek. Deal. The next few days were normal. Well, the new normal. Nicky seemingly had lost all interest in having friends over with his ongoing tether pet responsibilities. In fact, we even got an email from his soccer coach that he was absent-mindedly monitoring his device while on the sidelines. We used to get emails that he needed to stop hogging the ball so much. One evening, as we put him to bed, we explained that if his pet continued to affect his school participation, that we'd have no choice but to confiscate it from him. He appeared gravely disturbed by this notion. "That'd make you a murderer." It was such an absurd thing to say, but he said it with such conviction, a conviction that I don't believe an 8-year-old should be able to feel. I'd soon understand why. Yesterday, around noon, Nicky's at school, Nori's at work. I get a call from the principal. "Everything's fine. We just wanted to let you know that we needed to confiscate a toy from your son today, as it was distracting him from classwork." No parent ever enjoys these calls. I apologize. We've talked to him about this before. We'll have another chat about it tonight and make sure he gets the message. Would you like us to hold on to it for now, or send him home with it? God, I wish I could go back in time. Hold on to it. I knew Nicky would be furious, but as a father, I assumed this was a good opportunity for some tough love. Sure enough, when Nicky got home, he was in a panic. "Dad, they took my tether pet away." She's gonna die, Dad. She's gonna die. I got on one knee and gave him my look. Even if it dies, it'll be okay, because it's just a toy, right? You can always just start over. He started crying, as though really accepting the fact that this could really be the end for his pet. It's not just a toy, Dad. It feels real. It is real. Right then, it all clicked. Nicky wasn't grieving a toy. He was grieving his grandma. I felt a wave of relief, now seemingly able to connect the dots that didn't align to me before. I decided to make this a teaching moment. Nicholas, death is hard. We're all facing that with Grandma right now, right? Nicky nodded knowingly. But it's a natural part of life. It's not wrong or bad. It's okay. It can feel sad to let somebody go, but everything really will be okay. Really? Come here, pal. I pulled him in for a hug. Death is what makes life special. It's what makes each moment count. It's a good thing. Snot was running down Nicky's nose, onto my shoulder. But I don't want Baba to die. I know. Just then, my phone began to ring. It was Nori. Hey, Han, what's up? The hospital just called me. I think it's happening. My heart stopped. I let go of Nicky. He stepped back, feeling my mood shift. What did they say? She's refused to eat or drink all day, including her medications. Then she had a seizure, and has only been getting worse since then. Where's Nicky? Why did this feel familiar? This sensation. It was like deja vu. I could feel myself freezing up. Nicky tapped my knee. Daddy, what's wrong? I blurted out, Honey, what was that name you called Mom as a baby? Nori seemed frustrated that I had ignored her question. Gaba, or Baba, I think. Babe, you and Nicky need to meet me at Mount Sinai. A jolt of fear struck down my spine. All of a sudden, my mind felt like it was racing ahead of me. My mother-in-law's mortality, being connected to a toy, was quite the leap, I know. But in that moment, it truly felt crystal clear. How could this happen? It felt like the most basic rules of reality were simply torn out from under me. I had to move. Fast. We're on our way. A wall of obsidian clouds lay heavy above our neighborhood. Nicky and I piled into the car. Daddy, where are we going? We're going to see Grandma. But we'd take a quick detour first. Nicky looked afraid. Is Grandma gonna die? Daddy? I couldn't respond. What could I even say at that point? I'm supposed to be the voice of reason, but I felt like I was losing it. In fact, it had started raining, and it took me 6 blocks to realize I didn't have my wipers on. We pulled up to the school entrance. Nicky, wait here. I leaped out of the car before Nicky could question my actions. I ran up to the glass double doors, pounding my fists in the rain. Hey, is there anybody in there? Nothing. I ran around the building towards the gymnasium. Locked. I was really starting to feel hopeless. I noticed a window, slightly ajar on the 2nd story of the building. I tried scaling the wall, but the downpour made it impossible. Fuck, this was so stupid. It occurred to me that this really could just be a crazy coincidence, that my mother-in-law was dying right now, and I was here in the rain, trying to break into an elementary school. But then I noticed a tetherball stand, held down by a weighted tire. I ran over to it, flipped it on its side, and with all my might, pushed it toward the base of where the window was. I got a good grip on it and started to climb. If I could balance on the top, I should just be able to reach the windowsill. The rain made my hands slippery, but I just focused on Aki, on Baba. I felt a bellow of thunder rumble through the sky and knew my time was running out. Just as I reached the top, I heard, "Daddy, Daddy." Nicky was standing at the base of the tetherball pole, clearly scared, drenched in the rain. I called out to him, "Wait right there. I'll be back." Bam! A crack of blinding white light, and then total black. I don't remember anything after that. Just some vague limbo of nothing. I woke up, laid up in a hospital bed. My body was aching all over, craning my neck around. I pieced together that I was in Mount Sinai Hospital in Queens. I had no idea how much time had passed. Nori and Nicky entered the room shortly after. My mind began to fill up with questions, but I was too weak to get them out. I just laid there in a daze. Nori started crying. Nicky stood like a statue, just staring at the floor. I felt like Lazarus, back from the dead. The first question I managed to ask was if Aki was still with us. She wasn't. A nurse joined us and explained to me that I had been struck by lightning on that tetherball pole. They'd need to run some additional testing that evening. My family doesn't know yet, but I am now suffering from electrical cardiomyopathy, aka my heart is fucked. As I write this, Nori and Nicky are asleep under the roof of our humble home, but I'm still here. I have no idea when I'll get out. And the more I look into my condition, the more I wonder if I even will. But this isn't the reason I'm sharing any of this is now. It's because of what just happened to me. Only a couple hours ago now, a man came into my room while I was sleeping, unannounced. He looked like a doctor, but didn't state himself as one. Simply, he placed his hand over mine. "Give it to someone you trust." Then he left. I could feel a soft, plastic object left behind in my palm, but it was too dark to see, when suddenly a little display lit up. 8-bit text floated across the bright screen. FAFA. The text faded, leaving only my own bloodshot eyes, gazing back at myself. Nicholas used to call me that. I feel so lost right now. I feel so hopeless. I don't know what any of this means, or what I am supposed to do. If anyone has gone through something like this, or knows someone who has, please tell me. I feel so alone. I don't want to die. I love you, Nori. I love you, Nicholas.